What's up guys, this is your favorite fanfic YouTuber, the Fanfic Majesty, and welcome to another amazing video. You can follow me on Patreon for exclusive stories. 3 Pi Chapter 51 The difference between a swordsman and a great swordsman. Leaving the Golden Lion's Palace Island, Sorata took Indigo on the door panel and flew towards Rog Town at high speed. When I was going to Rog Town, I met Liberty. Originally, it only took 1 day to get from Puluoshu's Island to Rog Town, but because the boat was full of people and the waves were too strong in the first half, it took Kuina and the others a day and a half to get there. They sent the villagers to the town of Rog, but instead of entering the town, they changed their course and returned quickly. Watching Sorata step on the door panel and land on the deck. Standing at the bow of the boat, Kuina had a bright smile on his indifferent face. She walked quickly to Sorata, hugged his arm, and stared at him with her head up, without looking at Indigo. It was difficult for her eyes to be attracted by other things, and her eyes were always on Sorata. Sorata, you are finally back. I thought you two would fight for how long? That old thing does have something. Even if he is about to die, he can fight me with his will for a day and 2 nights. Sorata reached out and rubbed Kuina's head. He liked to rub Kuina's head, and he got used to it. And Kuina also squinted her eyes in enjoyment, and rubbed her head with her head like a cat. Every time she let Sorata mess up her hair, and then let Sorata comb her hair by hand. She enjoys the process. Who is this? It was a moment before she turned her eyes to Indigo. This is Dr. Indigo, and he's our ship's doctor now. Sorata looked at Indigo and introduced. Oh, hello, Dr. Indigo. Kuina's voice was cold, neither too cold nor too enthusiastic. Although she is usually not very interested in other things except training and fighting. But since Indigo can be recognized by Sorata, she will be a partner on the same boat from now on, and she is still very friendly to her partners. Well, hello, leave your health to me at ease in the future. Indigo made 2 puffs, turned around in a circle, and performed a gentleman's etiquette. Wow. Why are you so weird? At this moment Arlo slid down from the mast. That's right, it's like a performer in an amusement park. Awa walked out of the kitchen with his glasses on. He didn't know what this guy was doing in the kitchen. Anyway, he stayed in the kitchen as long as he had nothing to do. I said you two guys, hurry up and pull up the sails. At this moment, a Dao's head popped out from the door of the cab, shouting loudly. After receiving Sorata, they will turn back to the town of Rog. Advertisement Arlo and Ahua quickly helped adjust the sails. After adjusting the course, the 3 guys surrounded Indigo, and all kinds of weird problems came one after another. And Indigo also mingled with these 3 guys. From time to time, a magic bullet came, which made the 3 guys yell. Those who don't know really think that Indigo is a magician. At the bow, Sorata lay back on his exclusive recliner again. He glanced at Awa. This guy is not sensible. Didn't you see the boss came back? He didn't take the initiative to serve a glass of juice. It seems that he has to take care of him more in the future. Looking at Kuina beside him, he sat up, took her hand, let her sit next to him, and told him about the battle with the Golden Lion. Includes everything you've learned about swordplay, plus Hoki's techniques for wielding it. In fact, it has been more than a year since Kuina reached the realm of swordsman. I believe that with these skills, there will be a few more big battles, and he will be able to become a great swordsman soon. In fact, apart from the power of slashing, there is still a big difference between swordsman and great swordsman. The great swordsman can add Hoki to the slash, which not only has high melee damage, but also is not weak at long range. On the other hand, the sword hero's slash is actually very weak, far from direct melee combat, and the damage caused by hitting the enemy with a knife is high. This is the reason why swordsmen seldom use slashing, but directly use swords in melee combat. Therefore, to be promoted to a great swordsman, one must not only comprehend Zontai, but also the breadth of all things, and one step further is actually knowledge. You have to practice armament Hoki to high-level use. Let me tell you the difference here. Armament Hoki. Armament Hoki has different usage skills due to its flowable characteristics, which can be divided into hardening, winding, external release, and internal destruction. There are high and low skills in using armed colors, but it does not mean the strength of armed colors, let alone the level of strength. It is precisely because of its mobility that it is called emission in Wanokuni. Hardening is easy to understand. It is to cover the body with armament Hoki, which can make the body harder than steel and improve its defense and attack power. In addition to using it on your own body, it can also be used on objects. This is also the most common and basic way to use armed colors in New World. Entanglement is to wrap the gas like armament Hoki outside the body, which can improve its own defense and attack power. It can be entangled on weapons, and can also be entangled on flying objects, arrows and bullets, for a certain period of time. It can be used together with hardening. Putting it outside is an advanced use. Gather the armed colors on the hands or weapons and release them, which will directly evolve into substantial attack or defense power. It can hit the enemy with a powerful impact and form a protective wall, and even defend against the enemy. Invisible attack. As for the highest internal damage, not many people in the entire world can use this thing. This thing can release the armed color and pass through the surface of the object, directly destroying the inside of the object. And hardening, winding, and outward release can be used at the same time. He's just now at the point where armament Hoki is out. The battle with Golden Lion, although his hockey has been strengthened a lot, but it has not yet reached the highest level, so he has to work harder. He has been using hockey to practice Zonkong all the time, and he believes that when Zonkong reaches the Black Knife, he will be able to reach the highest level of hockey. Advertisement: the slash of the Great Swordsman is the use of advanced armament hockey, coupled with the incomparable slash of the Great Swordsman, forming the strongest slash with ultra-long range attacks. This kind of slash is not only fast and powerful, but it can also hurt Logia. So many people are afraid of the Great Swordsman. Don't look at New World, where everyone seems to be able to use weapons and even slash from the body, thinking that there are many swordsmen. However, the reality is just the opposite. The slashes of these guys are completely different from the flying slashes of real swordsmen. The sword heroes' slashing and attacking skills are all trained one after another for many years. It is not only concise, but also brings each swordsman's own unique perception of swords. Every swordsman's slash is the product of his own unique training. We can learn the methods of condensed slashing from other swordsmen, but we cannot learn their real slashing. This is why every swordsman, including the Great Swordsman, has different slashes. So if you want to be promoted to a Great Swordsman, you first have to train from a young age, step by step, to promote to the point where there is no progress. At this point, as long as your aptitude is not very bad, you can basically awaken your arm color, and then you can comprehend the breadth of all things, then you are definitely a swordsman. Next, if you want to be a great swordsman, you really need aptitude. Armed color advanced use of this thing is actually exclusive to monsters and geniuses. Monsters are born with powerful aptitudes. Once they awaken their armed colors, as long as they are not useless, they can easily be armed in combat and in daily training. See Wong Luffy and Lu Zoro. How long has it been since these two awakenings, and armament hockey is almost at full level. Armed color is like tempering steel. The more you use it, the more condensed it becomes. The more condensed you are, the easier it is for you to control it. In the end, the promotion came naturally. However, it is difficult for ordinary people to awaken their weapons. If you let him use this thing unlimitedly, he doesn't have the amount. That's why the swordsman realm and great swordsman baffle so many people. Because the difference between these two realms is so great, for ordinary people. It's like the difference between heaven and earth. This is not a state that you can achieve through hard work and hard work. It's because it's inherently impossible. As for Kuina, that is of course qualified enough to be able to fight Lu Zoro 10,000 times and win, not to mention the top qualifications, at least the top group. In addition, I have trained with Sorata since I was a child, and I have so much experience as a great swordsman, and I have worked hard enough, but it is difficult not to think of a great swordsman. In fact, Zoro has been training with him for so long as he wakes up, he will soon become a swordsman. As for the armed color, I believe that Zoro may not have to wait until Wong Luffy goes to sea 2 years later to be able to awaken. 2 years later, when Wong Luffy goes to sea and meets Zoro, who is already a strong swordsman, whether he can let Zoro on board with his personal charm. Chapter 52. It's not really as bad as poop, is it? Just after Sorata told Kuina about the process and gains of the battle with Golden Lion. On the deck below, the three of Ahua suddenly heard loud exclamations. Wow! No way! It's really devil fruit. The three of Ahua's eyes lit up, looking excitedly at the box in Indigo's hand. The box has been opened, and there are two strange-looking fruits lying inside, one black and one white, covered with spiral patterns. Is this the treasure of the sea, devil fruit? It looks delicious. The three of Ahua stared at the box greedily and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. These two fruits seem to have magical powers, exuding an incomparably seductive aura, like the most delicious food in the world, making people want to eat it immediately. They didn't reach for it, but looked away with great perseverance, and looked up at Sorata coming down from the boat together. They never expected that just a few days ago, Sorata was still telling them about devil fruit. Not long after that, Sorata got back too. Sorata walked past them, not laughing at their embarrassment. Not to mention the three of Ahua, this thing has a little temptation for him. Because devil fruit is like a devil's temptation to ordinary people. Greed, longing, wanting to possess something right away is human nature. Most devil fruits are eaten as soon as they are found, and only a few can be left behind. Those who stayed were either the ones who found it, the ones who ate devil fruit, or they were not ordinary people at all. Because ordinary people simply cannot resist the temptation of this thing. Although they don't even know what devil fruit is. Because of this, there are so few devil fruits circulating in the world. However, for most people, pirates, and forces in this world, this is something that can only be obtained by luck and strong funds. For the aloof celestial dragons, it's just an ordinary plaything. They can even feed their slaves devil fruit for fun. Advertisement: so devil fruit, if you say it is precious, it is relative to ordinary people. For big people, unless it is Logia, phantom beast species, this kind of fruit that is rare to the ultimate can make them feel precious. Ordinary zone, or paramecia, is just an ordinary fruit to them. These two fruits can stay because to Golden Lion, these things are worthless. Even if you change weapons, you can't sell them at a high price. Seeing Sorata approaching, Indigo hurriedly stepped forward with a puff and handed the box in front of Sorata. Looking at him curiously, he said with a smile, Kale, Captain, there are 3 friends here, but there are only 2 fruits, how do you divide them? Sorata first took out the black devil fruit from the box, and casually threw it to Arlo. Seeing Aluo, who hastily took the fruit, he explained. This devil fruit is an ant fruit. As for its power, we will only know after eating it. He paused, glanced at Awa and Adao, and said with a smile, as for why I gave it to Aluo, it's because I think this devil fruit best suits Aluo's character. Character? Aloha had a puzzled look on his face. Well, it's character. Sorata looked at Arlo with a hint of admiration in her eyes. Arlo is a typical person who, as long as he is assigned a task, he must strictly complete it. He can stay on the lookout 24 hours a day. It is a great quality to know that a person can endure loneliness and stay in a small place for a long time. Arlo is also the only one of the three of them who has been in society. He knows what a team needs most. That's why he went to practice guns, because there are enough swordsmen on their ship. For those of them who are not swordmasters, guns are the most lethal weapons. Arlo is also the one who yearns for power the most among the three, otherwise he would not give up getting married and go to sea with Sorata. In fact, when Arlo was on board, Sorata discovered his hidden ambition. Thinking about it, it must have been the past 2 years. When I was mixed in the society, I was beaten a lot. He looked at Aluo and smiled. It's not just about choosing devil fruit is also choosing people. People who are more compatible with devil fruit are more likely to develop fruit abilities to a high level. Advertisement. He glanced at the ant fruit in Aluo's hand, and then said, and the fruit in your hand fits your personality very well. Take care of the team, work hard, do your duty, and be brave and fearless. This fruit is indeed weak in the eyes of others, but in my opinion, as long as it is developed to a high level, it should be very strong. Sorata looked at Arlo and gave him an encouraging look. He believed in Aluo, and also believed in his intuition. He felt that the ant fruit could not be as weak as it was recorded in the books. After all, in nature, there are no more insects than ants. Looking at Sorata's encouraging eyes, Arlo didn't think much about it. Since Sorata gave it to him, he took it. He lifted the ant fruit, opened his mouth wide, and bit the devil fruit with a big bite. At this moment, he felt that the fruit in his mouth was not a delicious food, but a moldy and smelly sea fish that had been stored for dozens of days. It was a disgusting taste that he couldn't describe, rampaging in his mouth. If he didn't close his mouth quickly, he would definitely spit it out the first time he bit it. Aluo suppressed his nausea, his eyes flashed fiercely, and he swallowed the fruit in his mouth. He looked at the fruit left in his hand, didn't stop, took a few big mouthfuls, and ate the whole fruit. Just when he finished eating the fruit, he felt his stomach was overwhelmed, and a super disgusting breath came out of his throat. He covered his mouth, his face turned red. He was afraid that he couldn't help but spit out the fruit he just ate. Vomit. The guy endured it for a while, and finally couldn't help it, and quickly lay down on the ground and retched. Awa and the two looked at Aluo, who was retching, tears and snot flowing from his nose, and swallowed hard. Then they turned their heads and looked at the white devil fruit left in the box in Indigo's hand. A trace of fear flashed across his face. Is this thing so scary? How unpalatable it is to make Aluo retch like this. Sorata and Indigo grinned. Kuina even put her hands on Sorata's back, bent over, and laughed like a goose cry. Devil fruit is notoriously unpalatable. It is said that it is worse than shit, and I don't know which expert has tried the difference between the two, and the conclusion is that Sorata can only admire the expert. He knew it was unpalatable, but he didn't expect it to be so unpalatable. Looking at Aluo's appearance, I'm afraid I don't want to see devil fruit again in this life. Chapter 53 Nami Simplified Version. Arlo retched for a while. Suddenly the nausea in his stomach disappeared quickly, and then a force he had never felt came from his body. This force made him itchy all over, and quickly completed the whole body transformation. Seeing that Aluo was no longer retching, everyone looked at him curiously. I saw Arlo lying on the ground trembling for a while, then rapidly inflated, and turned into a huge black ant in a short while. Ahua and Ahua looked at Aluo, who had turned into a black ant, with shock on their faces. It was the first time they had seen such a spectacle. A living person, given the power of a demon, literally turns into an insect. Sorata and Kuina behaved a bit better, although they were also curious, but not shocked yet. Indigo grinned. He has seen such scenes a lot. For him, now there is no novelty at all. Ever since Arlo became an ant, he basically knew the true purpose of the ant fruit. He stood up excitedly on his hind legs, first his head, then his body, and quickly turned into an ant-man with 4 arms and 2 antennae above his head. Wow, it's amazing. Awa watched Aluo's transformation, and quickly rushed towards Aluo, trying to grab the tentacles on his head. And Aluo was like a prophet. He took a step to the side first, and easily avoided Ahua's hand grabbing his tentacles. Okay. Sorata saw Arlo's movements, and a gleam flashed in his eyes. He looked at Aluo, and suddenly quickly reached out and grabbed his head. And Arlo, like a prophet, escaped Sorata's hand first. Adao stopped in the air with her hand holding the cigarette, and Awa stood behind Aluo and looked at Aluo in shock. He didn't know what the ability to predict the opponent's attack route in advance was. But he is often seen in Sorata and Kuina. Presumably it is an ability exclusive to the strong. He didn't know what it was, but Indigo did. He looked at Aluo curiously, with a hint of shock on his face. Observation hockey? It's not the color of knowledge, it should be the enhancement of perception that comes with the fruit. Sorata looked at Aluo with a smile in his eyes. However, with such a strong perception, if you train, you should be able to really awaken observation hockey soon. Oh, although not really knowledgeable, Indigo was still shocked. Observation Hockey. This thing is not so easy to awaken as armed color. If you talk about armed color, as long as your aptitude is not too bad, ordinary people can achieve awakening through a lot of exercise. The observation hockey is completely different. This thing really needs opportunities and qualifications. Advertisement. It is simply not something that ordinary people can awaken. He wasn't surprised by observation hockey, although this thing is based on talent, but who is he? He is the ship's doctor on board the legendary pirate Golden Lion. Not to mention observation hockey, but conqueror's hockey, he has seen many of them. What really shocked him was that ant fruit can actually give people the ability to quickly awaken observation hockey. If he had known this earlier, the fruit would have been sold long ago. Arlo felt the changes in his body well, and slowly opened his eyes. He first looked at Sorata gratefully. This ant fruit has brought him too much change. He feels that he can instantly kill his former self in an instant. This powerful feeling is really fascinating. Sorata saw Arlo wake up with a smile on his face. Sure enough, ant fruit had other abilities as he had imagined. Just because of its ability to quickly awaken observation hockey, this fruit will not rank too low among zone fruits. Such a strong perception ability, coupled with the body vibration brought by the ant fruit, as long as Aluo works hard to train in his space field in the future, I believe that the two-color hockey will be awakened soon. At that time, no matter whether he wants to continue to practice swords to become a swordsman or to practice guns to become a sniper, he will get twice the result with half the effort. He stared at Aluo and smiled and asked, Aluo, tell me, what abilities do you have now besides strong perception? Arlo scanned the surroundings. The tentacles on his head moved, all pointing in one direction. He turned his head to look in the direction of the tentacles, and said excitedly, my tentacles can sense the changes in the nearby weather. Weather change? Both Sorata and Indigo showed shocked expressions. Sorata was shocked that ant fruit is so powerful. Isn't this the weakened version of Nami? And Indigo is purely worthless for Golden Lion. If Golden Lion knows the ability of ant fruit, he will rush out of hell without regret. He knew that the Golden Lion was not afraid of anything but the weird weather. If Golden Lion could find someone who could predict the weather or the ability, with his huge fleet and ability to fly, he might have dominated the world long ago. How far away the weather can feel right now? Sorata came back to her senses, looked at Arlo and asked. Damn, if Aluo can make an appointment for the weather, then his 10 years of sailing books will be in vain. Unexpectedly, studying hard, I was always lost to the speed of opening and hanging. Aluo closed his eyes, and the tentacles on his forehead swayed for a while, sensing it for a while. He opened his eyes, looked at Sorata and said with a smile, I can probably perceive a few kilometers around. He stroked his chin and thought for a while, then said, in the future, through training, you can gradually master the ability of fruits, and you should be able to increase the range. Really pervert. Indigo stood aside and sighed. For people sailing on the Grand Line, the most terrifying thing is never the pirates or the marine, but the weird and changeable weather. He raised his head and stared at Arlo with piercing eyes, and you are now one of the few top navigators in the world. Advertisement. He turned his head and looked at Sorata excitedly. On this small pirate ship in his eyes, not only has the world's top powerhouse like the captain, but also has top navigators. Then the Grand Line, for them, will have little threat to their existence. Thinking of this, he couldn't help laughing out loud. Kale. Kale. Sorata could sense Indigo's joy, and he was, too. He looked at Aluo and asked with a smile. Aluo will be the navigator on our ship from now on, plus the watchman. I don't know if you should continue to practice swords, or practice spears. Arlo put away his excitement and looked at Sorata seriously. I'm still going to practice with the gun. Since he felt that there was no hope in practicing swords, he turned his attention to guns. That's what their team needs too. Okay, Sorata looked at Arlo and didn't say anything. This was his own choice, and he respected his choice. You boy, you will really become the second best player on the ship in the future. Adao walked up to Aluo, stretched out her hand to wrap his shoulders and said enviously. He is genuinely happy with Arlo's changes. Of course, he only admitted that Arlo is now the second to last, and it is impossible for Arlo to surpass him as the third. Aluo pulled Adao's hand away, turned around and showed him the muscles on his forearms. What second? I'm clearly the third right now. What? Don't think that after eating a devil fruit, you want to challenge me. I think you are bloated. Not to be outdone, Adao rolled up his sleeves, revealing his arms that were thicker than ordinary people's thighs. Adao is the strongest and tallest of the three of them. Otherwise, Awa and the other two would not have been willing to give up the third position before. Hey, I said, did you two guys forget about me? Awa couldn't bear to watch. Did both of them swell? Is he, Wa, so shameless? He admitted that he should not be able to beat Arlo now, but he can't lose his momentum, right? Okay, stop arguing. I'm afraid you won't have the energy to quarrel in the future, and your training will increase in the future. Increase the amount, who is afraid of whom? Awa said loudly. Arlo shrugged indifferently. He can't wait to train immediately, of course it doesn't matter. On the other hand, Adao calmly took out the cigarette, exhaled smoke rings, and pretended to be cool. This guy is the best at pretending among the three of them. Chapter 54. The carrot to the strong Sorata looked at the three guys amusedly. Turning around, he took out the remaining white devil fruit from the box in Indigo's hand. Seeing Sorata's movements, the three of Arlo gave a pause and stared at Sorata curiously. A trace of longing flashed in Ahua's eyes. After seeing the changes in Aluo, he must be the most anxious person on board. In the past, both he and Aluo were more salty fish than anyone else. Now that Aluo has taken off, he also wants to become stronger. Otherwise, he would have to be ridiculed every day by this guy, Aluo. Sorata glanced between Awa and Adao. He could clearly feel Ahua's nervousness, while Adao had a little indifferent attitude. He looked down at the white fruit in his hand. A trace of hesitation flashed in his eyes. This fruit may be useless, it is not like an ant, he can clearly feel that it has a strong potential. As for rabbit fruit, he really didn't know what was so powerful about it. To talk about the red-eyed rabbit, berserk or something, this is purely his guess. If they don't have special abilities after eating the fruit, then it's better not to eat it. At least if you don't eat it, you won't be afraid of seawater. After eating this thing, your strength doesn't increase much, and there is an absolutely fatal weakness. This is somewhat uneconomical. Looking at Ahua's longing eyes, he was certain in his heart and decided to leave it to himself to decide. He didn't give it to Adao, it was because Adao was the strongest of the three of them. Also the most patient and powerful one. Awa, it's up to you to decide whether to eat this fruit or not. Sorata looked at Awa, and said seriously, this may be a very useless fruit, or it may be a very powerful fruit as I guessed. What about your decision? Looking at Sorata's serious eyes and feeling the provocative gaze from Aluo, Ahua did not hesitate too much. He said firmly, I want to eat. Devil fruit is an unattainable treasure for ordinary people. But for him, it is within reach now. There is nothing to hesitate, even if it is a very useless fruit. Can it be more useless than him now? Okay. Staring at Ahua's firm eyes, Sorata threw the rabbit fruit in his hand to him. Now that you have made a decision, let's eat quickly. Everyone looked at Awa expectantly. Especially Arlo, he has personally experienced the unforgettable taste of devil fruit. Just thinking about it makes him sick. Looking at the white fruit in his hand, Awa thought about Aluo's tragic situation before, and a trace of hesitation flashed in his eyes. Then his eyes behind the lens kicked, and a fierce breath exuded from his whole body. He looked at the rabbit fruit as if he were looking at an enemy. He opened his mouth fiercely, and swallowed the rabbit fruit on his hand into his mouth in one gulp. Then I swallowed hard, and finally I was so suffocated by the rabbit fruit that I almost rolled my eyes, and then I swallowed it into my stomach. The people around were shocked by Ahua's coquettish manipulation. Aluo looked at Awa with remorse on his face and tears in his heart. Why didn't he know how to swallow it in one bite? Advertisement. Thinking about it now, it was like eating shit, and after taking a few bites, he felt nauseous. Sorata looked at the guy in shock. Isn't this how Buggy eats devil fruit by mistake? It's amazing. Only Ahua's obese physique can eat such a big fruit in one bite. The moment Awa ate the fruit, he turned into a fat white rabbit. He stood where he was, his eyes were bloodshot, and he exuded an extremely chaotic aura. It seemed that he was holding back something, and his whole body was shaking. Sorata looked at Awa, seemed to understand something, and hurriedly told everyone to take a few steps back. This guy seems to be unable to control himself. Judging from the aura, it is indeed a violent and chaotic aura. More than 10 times stronger than before. It seems that he guessed right again. It is really the favor of the goddess of luck. This can be picked up by him. Looking at the rabbit that Awa turned into, he couldn't help smiling. This rabbit looks like an extremely strong fruit, and I don't know why it is regarded as a garbage fruit. Could it be that the illustration book is wrong? Rabbits are also divided into breeds. There are also Arlo's ants, which are not ordinary ants at first glance. Thinking of this, he couldn't help giving Golden Lion a big thumbs up in his heart. What a good master. Not only taught him a lot of hockey sword skills, but also gave him a doctor with superb medical skills. In the end, even the navigators were solved. Now even the rabbit fruit he thought was the most useless was a powerful zone fruit. Looking at Awa, who gradually controlled himself and the violent breath disappeared from his body. Everyone hurriedly gathered around, looking at Awa curiously, waiting for his explanation. Ahua looked at the expectant eyes of everyone, and turned back into a human body very arrogantly. It's just that his current body is a bit hot-eyed. Such a fat and strong man actually has 2 rabbit ears. And on the originally fat butt, there was also a fat, fluffy rabbit tail exposed. It would be better if it was on a beautiful girl. But these are a bit perverted on a strong man. Feeling the strange eyes of everyone looking at him, Ahua's face showed doubts. He looked down at him. It wasn't until he saw the tail on his butt that he realized it. Then his face turned red quickly, and he was so ashamed that he ran into the kitchen as quickly as a rabbit. With a bang, the door was closed. Seeing Awa fleeing in embarrassment, everyone burst into laughter. Among them, Arlo laughed the most. He fell to his knees, patting the deck with his 4 hands, and was out of breath from laughing. Sorata held back a smile and looked at the crowd. Okay, don't laugh anymore. Isn't it just a rabbit's tail? What's so funny about that? Advertisement. As he spoke, he couldn't help but bend over, covered his stomach and laughed loudly. Awa behind the cabin door listened to the laughter outside. His face turned red as if he was about to bleed. He took a deep breath. Turning his head to look at the kitchen, he suddenly saw the refrigerator, and then a flash of inspiration flashed in his mind, and he thought of something. He quickly cleaned up the awkwardness in his heart and rushed to the refrigerator. Opened the refrigerator and rummaged through it. After a while, I saw him dig out a bag of carrots from the refrigerator. He stared at the carrot in his hand for a while, then turned to the stove, put on a chef's hat and an apron, and started cooking quickly. The people outside, hearing the commotion in the kitchen, thought this guy turned shame and anger into appetite. They stopped laughing and were about to go up and knock on the door. Suddenly the kitchen door opened from the inside. I saw Ahua holding the plate. The expression of shame and indignation had long since disappeared, and there was nothing awkward about it. He walked up to Sorata generously, raised the plate excitedly, and handed it to Sorata. Sorata. Try it, my new cooking ingredient. Everyone looked at Ahua in confusion. Is this guy so ashamed and angry that he really thinks he is a rabbit? It turned out to be a carrot dish. Sorata looked at Ahua's excited expression, and the smile on his face disappeared. He could clearly feel Ahua's excitement at the moment, which was like the excitement of discovering a huge treasure. He looked down at the carrots on the plate in front of him, and solemnly took one and looked at it carefully. It is no different from regular carrots. He didn't think much about it, and just took a bite when he brought it to his mouth. Okay. With just one bite, an expression of extreme shock appeared on his face. This was the second time he had shown such an expression today. He looked at the carrot in his hand, and looked up at Ahua with bright eyes, as if looking at a peerless treasure. Is this the function of devil fruit? Ahua nodded repeatedly. Looking at the excited expressions of Sorata and Ahua, the others noticed something. They all reached out to take a carrot from the plate in Ahua's hand, and ate it. Wow. No way. Adao and Aluo looked at Ahua with blushing faces. With this thing, they will become strong in the future. Indigo was even more shocked. He didn't even know his mood today, how many ups and downs he had experienced. He looked at the carrot in his hand and once again silently mourned for the golden lion. Even Kuina showed a rare expression of shock after eating the radish. This carrot is not a carrot, but their potion and food that lead to the strong. Because this thing can actually restore physical strength quickly. With this, they can train as much as they want in the space field of Sorata. Chapter 55 Smoker Town of Rog. Known as the town where it begins and ends, it is the closest town in East Blue to the entrance of the Grand Line. It is also the town where the previous generation of One Piece, Gold D. Roger, was born and died. At this time, the marine base in Rog Town had just settled the bearded gang. As for the villagers of Puluoshu's Island, they were placed in the cathedral in the town, waiting for the arrangement of the world government. In the white building behind the base school grounds, in the base chief's office, white smoke was constantly coming out through the crack of the door. People who don't know it will definitely think that there must be a fire inside. But from the face of the patrolling marine passing by, there was no sign of worry at all. This shows that they have already become accustomed to Bai Yan. At this moment, a female marine was wearing a light orange shirt with pink flowers printed on it, dark blue jeans, short black hair, and a pair of thick black-rimmed myopia glasses on her face. With some hasty footsteps, he pushed open the door of the base chief's office. The female marine stood in the smoky room, frowning, and complained to a hazy figure shrouded in the smog. Colonel Smoker, could I trouble you to open the window every time you smoke? After she finished speaking, she walked to the window and pushed it open. A gust of wind came in along the window, instantly blowing away the smoke in the office, revealing a burly man sitting on the single sofa behind the desk. The man was about 30 years old, with short silver hair, his upper body was bare, his legs were on the desk, and he was lying on the sofa with 2 cigars in his mouth, reading a newspaper. I don't know how this guy can read the newspaper clearly in a room where he can't see his fingers. Smoker looked at the female marine standing by the desk, put the newspaper in his hand on the desk, lowered his legs, and spoke fiercely to her. Sergeant Toshigi, don't forget your identity, you don't have to worry about my affairs. His fierce tone and look didn't help Toshigi though. Toshigi raised the fax document in his hand and slapped it on the table. Seriously, he said, Colonel Smoker, the news just came from the headquarters that the silver-haired Sorata, who offered a reward of 70 million berry, is coming to the town of Rog. 70 million? That's really high. Smoker picked up the papers on the desk and looked at them. Silver-hair Sorata. Looking at him with a hint of doubt on his face, he raised his head and asked Toshigi. Isn't this guy fighting the Golden Lion over Puluoshu's Island? Is the winner determined so quickly? Advertisement? The marine base in Rog Town received news of Sorata's battle with the Golden Lion before they received the bearded gang. Originally, Smoker was planning to go to Puluoshu's by himself, taking advantage of the battle between Golden Lion and Sorata, to see if he could arrest the 2 pirates. However, his application for sailing was directly rejected by naval headquarters, so he didn't go. Silver-haired Sorata, the first time he went to sea, he offered a reward of 70 million berry, and he also fought the legendary pirate Golden Lion, so he escaped unscathed. Frowning, Toshigi clapped his hands on the desk, leaned forward, stared at Smoker and said loudly. Colonel Smoker, please take it seriously. Although we don't know who will win between him and the Golden Lion, we can know his strength from the fact that he can fight against the legendary pirate Golden Lion. So what if you can fight the Golden Lion? Smoker put down the file in his hand, and said to Toshigi calmly. It's not okay to be so nervous about a little thing. I have my own way, right? Obviously they haven't received the news that the Golden Lion has died. If they know, it will be another scene. Smoker stood up from the sofa, walked to the clothes rack beside him, picked up a large white coat with the word, Justice, written on the back, and put it on his body. The guy's coat was covered with cigars, and it was obvious that his addiction to smoking had reached the level of obsession. Smoker couldn't leave his mouth, and just finished the cigarette in his mouth, he lit another one. He was smoking, turned to Toshigi and said calmly, "Also, when have you ever seen me let go of any pirate easily?" He paused, then cursed fiercely at Toshigi, "Stupid woman." Hearing Smoker's scolding, Toshigi calmed down his nervousness. That's the pirate with a bounty of 70 million berry, and the pirate with the highest bounty in East Blue so far, so it's no wonder she's not nervous. But nervousness is nervous, but she will not be afraid. She looked up at Smoker's fierce expression, and there was a glint of admiration in her eyes. With Colonel Smoker around, I believe that even the silver-haired Sorata will not be able to cross the town of Rog easily. Since Colonel Smoker came to Rog Town, very few pirates can cross his mountain and easily go to the Grand Line. Also, don't look at Colonel Smoker, who always has a fierce expression, but she knows that Colonel Smoker is actually a very gentle person in his heart. Toshigi pushed the frame of the mirror, stood up straight, and said loudly to Smoker with firm eyes, "I see, Colonel Smoker. Well, it's good to know." Smoker walked up to Toshigi, stroked Toshigi's hair, and said seriously, "We are Marine, and our duty is to catch pirates. It should be the pirates who are nervous when they see us, not us. Advertisement, and the other party is not an invincible pirate, is it?" Although he often scolds Toshigi, in his heart, he always treats Toshigi like a younger sister. Don't look at this stupid woman who always looks natural and dumb, but she is actually a very strong and brave person. When facing pirates, she bravely kills the enemy without flinching. In normal training, he is not afraid of hard work and works harder than most men. And Toshigi also has his own concept of justice just like him, which is why he values Toshigi the most. Smoker walked to the window, looked at Marine who was training on the school field below, and turned to Toshigi and asked, "By the way, do you know when the silver-haired gang will arrive?" Toshigi straightened his expression, reached for the document on the table, looked at it and said, "Judging from the news from the headquarters, Silverhair flew towards the town of Rog after a short fight with Bluzolino Admiral. As for the Golden Lion, no trace has been found yet." She pushed up her glasses and looked up at Smoker. "Combined with the silver-haired pirate ship in the morning and the sailing time, I'm afraid they should have converged by now and turned around and returned." "Do you know the exact time?" Smoker lit another cigar and smoked, staring at Toshigi and asked, "Noon. Is it noon?" Smoker stroked his chin, frowned and thought for a while, then looked up to Toshigi and ordered, "Go tell everyone to get ready. I'm going to keep Silverhair out of Rog Town this time." Toshigi stood up straight, gave a military salute, and shouted, "Yes, Colonel Smoker." Then she turned and left the office. After Toshigi left, Smoker turned his head to look at Sorata's reward on the table, and was stunned for a while. Then he turned around and took down a giant 10-handed weapon from the wall by the window. This weapon can not only restrain the swordsman's sword, he also specially added sea stone on the top of the weapon in order to deal with capable people. It doesn't matter whether the silver-haired guy can fight the Golden Lion, or escape from Bluzolino Admiral. He wasn't going to let this guy get out of Rog so easily. Even at the risk of his reputation as the White Hunter, Smoker. Chapter 56 Toshigi. Is this the town of Rog? Sorata and his party of 5 stood at the entrance of Rog Town, surrounded by a bubbling crowd of people. Why 5 and not 6? Because Indigo, despite his funny looks, is actually a standard otaku. This guy didn't want to meet too many strangers, so he stayed on the boat to watch the boat and didn't come down with them. This is the first time Sorata and the others have seen such a bustling pier. The entire pier is open, and there is no port like a general pier at all. Directly in front of the pier is the sea. The pier in a straight line is full of boats. Merchant ships, warships, fishing boats, densely packed. Even the figure of the pirate ship can be seen in the corner. It is indeed a town that must pass through on the way to the Grand Line. It's really big and prosperous enough. Sorata looked at the curved arches of Rog Town not far away, and sighed in his heart. Then he turned around and stared at the excited Ahua 3, and smiled. "I'm going to the Grand Line soon. You guys go to buy more necessities, and..." "Okay." He was about to continue when he was suddenly interrupted by a loud roar from the street ahead. I saw a huge motorcycle roaring past on the central street of Rog Town. Behind the motorcycle, followed by 2 rows of Marines in uniform. With a roar, the motorcycle finally stopped sideways between the pier and the town of Rog, right in front of Sorata and the others. "It's Colonel Smoker, yes." The people on the pier, all of whom obviously knew the people on the motorcycle, greeted Smoker with respectful shouts. Then they seemed to have thought of something, and they all stared at Sorata and his group standing in front of Smoker, with curiosity in their eyes. Strange, this group of people don't look like pirates. Is it a new debut? It's possible, after all, the old pirate should not be afraid to come to Rog Town now. Apparently they didn't know Sorata's gang, too. After all, the reward orders for Sorata and Kuina have only been released for a few days, so it is impossible to spread them so quickly, and they are only spreading in a small area now. At this time, the Marine behind had also followed up, and they dispersed one by one, forming a surrounding posture, and stopped Sorata and the others on the pier. All of them had serious expressions, holding the guns tightly in their hands. I believe that as long as Smoker gives an order, they can draw their guns and shoot immediately. As expected of East Blue's largest marine base, it is completely different from other branch marines. Sorata only saw tension in these marines, but not a trace of fear. Obviously these marines are elite. From here, we can actually see their confidence in Smoker. Sorata's gaze turned to Smoker, a twinkle of curiosity in her eyes. This guy is one of his few known marines, a marine general that he doesn't dislike. More than half of the pirates from East Blue to Grand Line were stopped in Rog Town forever by this guy. This also created the scene of the bustling Rog Town dock in front of you. Advertisement otherwise, the town of Rog is the last stop leading to the Grand Line, and it is also the hometown of the One Piece, Roger, and the place of execution. This place will definitely be filled with smoke and smog by the pirates who flock here. After all, Rog Town can be said to be a holy place in the hearts of pirates. Once there are more pirates, Rog Town will not be like it is now. Countless merchant ships will come here to do business, thus bringing prosperity. It can also be seen from here why the people on the pier respect Smoker very much. It was he who kept the entire town of Rog safe. What? At this moment, the eyes of Sorata and the others were all attracted by a woman coming out from behind Smoker's motorcycle. Wow, two Kuinas, the three of Ahua looked at Tashigi in amazement. Their eyes flicked back and forth between Tashigi and Kuina. There was shock on his face. Sorata also had a flash of shock when Tashigi came out. He didn't expect the two people to be so similar. Although the hair color of Kuina and Tashigi is different, but just from the face shape and height. These two people can't be said to be exactly the same, and there are 9 likenesses. If the two of them were standing together on the street at the same time, I believe everyone would think that these two must be twins. No wonder Zoro has been unable to look directly at Tashigi's face. It's really too similar. As soon as Tashigi came out, his eyes seemed to be attracted, and they met Kuina's eyes instantly. Surprise flashed in the eyes of the two women who looked almost the same. They all wondered in their hearts whether the other party had any blood relationship with her. Otherwise, how could the two of them look so similar? Okay. Just then, Tashigi pushed the frame and noticed Kuina's knife hanging from his waist. He took out a small book from the inside pocket of his coat and kept flipping through it. Finally stopped on a page. She stared up at Kuina, pupils dilated behind thick lenses, frowning, and shouted. I will never allow a pirate like you to carry that famous sword. The famous knife, He Dao Yi Wen, I want to take it back. She swore that she would collect all the famous knives that were taken away by the villains. Is a typical knife idiot. Oh, all three of Ahua stared at Tashigi excitedly. This woman actually wants to grab Kuina's knife. You must know that, He Dao Yi Wen, is Kuina's family knife. Usually only Sorata can be used. For them, it was impossible for Kuina to even let them touch. Kuina looked at Tashigi. The left hand holding the knife was tightened, the corner of his mouth curled up, and he sneered at Tashigi. If you want my knife, then come and try it. Tashigi leaned forward, drew out the saber, Xiaoyi Shiu, from his waist, held the saber in both hands, and raised it obliquely over his shoulders. Tashigi. Advertisement. Just as Smoker was about to call Tashigi to stop, Tashigi roared and rushed towards Kuina quickly. What? Kuina looked at Tashigi, drew the knife quickly, and swung it upwards. Clang, easily blocked Tashigi's knife. With this little power, do you want to grab my knife? Kuina gave Tashigi a contemptuous smile. Although this woman is very similar to her, the difference in strength and swordsmanship is too far. Sergeant Tashigi. The surrounding marines saw Tashigi make a move, and they all raised their guns, pointing their guns at Sorata and the others. Please don't interfere, this is between me and this woman. Seeing that the marines around him were about to make a move, Tashigi couldn't help shouting. He really didn't want other people to intervene, because it could be said to be her personal matter. She gritted her teeth, raised the knife quickly, turned the blade over, and slashed towards Kuina's open chest. Clang, like a prophet, Kuina stopped in advance to block the trajectory of Tashigi's slash. Then no matter how Tashigi swung the knife, he couldn't break through Kuina's defense. Clang, after another collision, Kuina remained motionless, while Tashigi, whose hands were trembling, was out of breath. Sorry, this knife is impossible to give you anyway. As she said that, Kuina exerted force on her hand, and with a clang, the knife in Tashigi's hand was directly knocked away. Then he took a step forward, and slashed towards Tashigi's neck with his right hand at an extremely fast speed. Because the speed was too fast, others could only see a flash of light. Xiaoyi Shiu rolled several 360 degrees in the air, and with a puff, it slanted into the ground not far away. And Kuina's blade landed on Tashigi's neck. It was just a hair away, and a hair could cut Tashigi's neck directly. Sergeant Tashigi. If you hurt Sergeant Tashigi, you guys, we won't let you go. The surrounding marines looked at the knife on Tashigi's neck and became nervous for a while. Smoker frowned. Just when he was about to move, Sorata suddenly appeared beside him. Well, take a good look. For this woman, Kuina shouldn't hate her and won't hurt her. Smoker looked at Sorata, his pupils constricted, and his right hand clenched tightly. What is this? I can't feel it at all. It appeared right next to him. He didn't dare to act rashly, because in his perception, Sorata was like an invincible sword, exuding a sharp edge facing him. He felt that as long as he moved, he would be torn apart by this sharp edge. He stared at Sorata, his thoughts racing. How could this guy only have 70 million berry? In his knowledge, he had only felt this kind of aura from the admirals. Are all the intelligence departments in the headquarters just working? This kind of strong person is actually only given 70 million. And let him meet. Chapter 57 weighing however, when Smoker scolded the headquarters in his heart. The headquarters is also having a headache for Sorata. Half a day is enough for Bluzolino and the Vice Admiral and Rear Admiral who followed him to the Golden Lion floating island to find out whether the Golden Lion is dead or has escaped. Sorata and Golden Lion battle the bottom of the giant pit in the center of the island. At this moment, a burst of golden light flashed, and Kizaru's figure gradually condensed and appeared at the bottom of the pit. This should be the final battle between Silver Hair and Golden Lion. Kizaru stood there sloppily, with his hands in his trouser pockets, looking left and right. It's terrible. Then a red light flashed in his eyes, and the color of knowledge swept across the entire huge pit in an instant. Okay. Nothing was found, and then outwards, sweeping across the entire island, there was no other breath except for the beast. Although he couldn't find the Golden Lion, his senses told him. The Golden Lion must be here, it's just not found. His sense of knowledge swept back and forth at the bottom of the pit, and finally stopped on a crack. The cracks were not filled, it was man-made at first glance, his knowledge swept down along the gaps in the soil. In his perception, there are two auras emitting endless sharpness below. If he can perceive it, it must not be an ordinary knife. He stroked his chin and thought for a while, then suddenly realized. The famous sword, Sakura 10, and the famous sword, Kukuru. The two sabers of the Golden Lion. So it seems that the Golden Lion is indeed completely dead. As Sorata guessed, Kizaru didn't bother Golden Lion even though there were two very powerful famous swords underneath. After all, people die, don't they? Naval headquarters at this time, in a large conference room where major events are discussed. As long as they are in the headquarters and have no special important things to do, the Vice Admirals and Rear Admirals are basically all concentrated in this large conference room. Even, Marine hero Vice Admiral Garp, in New World is back. After hearing the news that the old Golden Lion appeared again after 18 years, Garp was urgently called back by Marine. After all, Golden Lion has a history of attacking naval headquarters. At that time, it was Sengoku and Garp who joined forces to capture the old guy Golden Lion and put him in, impelled down. How did he know that Golden Lion was able to chop off his legs, thus becoming the first pirate to escape from impelled down? It has been 18 years since Golden Lion disappeared, and he must be planning some terrifying plan when he appears this time. Advertisement: most of the generals sitting here have experienced the Golden Lion's invasion of the headquarters 18 years ago. They are very clear about what kind of terrifying ability this old Golden Lion possesses. So for this meeting about Golden Lion, Marine was serious from top to bottom. At this time, everyone in the conference room sat quietly cross-legged on both sides of the conference room, waiting for Marshal Sengoku, who was sitting in the middle of the head, to hear the news of the phone bug in front of him. They have already learned from Kizaru that Sorata has left safely, and now they're waiting for news from Golden Lion. Just as everyone was waiting for the news from the phone bug with serious expressions. On the upper right side of the large conference room, there was an untimely, click, click, sound. When it was clear who was making the voice, everyone looked indifferent. Only Sengoku frowned slightly. Kazi, Kaz. Listening to Garp, it's going too far, like the sound of rats eating food. Sengoku finally couldn't take it anymore. He stared at Garp, yelling. Garp, pay attention to the occasion. Garp heard the shout, raised his head, looked at Sengoku, and asked suspiciously. What's wrong? Then he clenched his fist with his right hand and punched it on the palm of his left hand, with an expression of sudden realization. Sengoku, do you want to eat too? If you want to eat, just ask me for it. It's not like I won't give it to you. Reluctantly, he took out a senbei from the bag in front of him and handed it to Sengoku. Just one, there are no more. As he said that, he put the bag of senbei in front of him into his arms. Just like a hamster hiding food, it seems that he is very afraid that others will snatch his senbei. Seeing the senbei being handed in front of him, Sengoku finally couldn't hold it anymore. With veins popping out of his forehead, he yelled at Garp angrily. Garp, if you don't want to have a good meeting, get the hell out of here. The loud sound made the whole building tremble. Inside and outside the building, the Marines who heard Sengoku's roar all looked indifferent. In the entire naval headquarters, only Garp can make Marshal Sengoku yell in anger. Anyway, once or twice a month, they're all used to it. Advertisement. Garp looked at the enraged Sengoku. He dug his ears with his little finger indifferently and then laughed out loud. Ha 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 ha. Smiling, he quickly took back the senbei he handed out, ate it in one bite, then stretched out his hand and patted Sengoku's shoulder and said. Sengoku, don't be so stingy, isn't it just a bag of senbei? I just pay you back next time. Sengoku thought for a moment, then went into a rage. You guys stole my senbei again. What? As he said that, he roared, jumped at Garp, and snatched the senbei bag from Garp's arms. Looking up, he poured all the senbei in the bag into his mouth. My senbei, give me back. Garp snatched the already empty senbei bag from Sengoku, and everyone was dumbfounded. He pouted at Sengoku. Why don't you be so stingy? Okay, when are you two going to fight? At this moment, Chief of Staff Crane, who was sitting opposite Garp, couldn't stand it any longer. He saw that Sengoku and Garp were acting like two children, messing around on such an important occasion, so he couldn't help but call them to stop. Sengoku shot Garp a smug look. Obviously it's my senbei, but you still say it's yours. Next time, I'll even grab your donuts. He sat up straight, tidied his clothes, and glanced at the generals in the meeting room. Seeing the serious expressions of the generals, he nodded in satisfaction and regained his majesty as a marshal. Blue, 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 blue. Just then, the phone bug in front of Sengoku rang. Sengoku's expression was fixed, and he quickly reached out to pick up the microphone on the phone bug. This is Naval Headquarters Sengoku, who is on the other side, please answer. When Sengoku picked up the microphone to speak, the head of the phone bug suddenly changed into a head similar to that of Kizaru. The phone bug said wretchedly, "Hey, it's the Marshal. This is Paluzolino." When everyone in the conference room heard Kizaru's voice, their faces were all serious. Whether it is hearing that the Golden Lion died or not, it is actually a big problem for Marine. His death proves that silver-haired Sorata's strength can already rank among the top in the world. If not dead, the Golden Lion could cause even more trouble for Marine. Chapter 58 Completely Famous. A gleam flashed in Sengoku's eyes, and his face was serious. He stared at the phone bug and said, "Okay, Paluzolino Admiral, report your information." "Okay." Kizaru paused for a moment, and then said in a rare serious tone, "The fact that the Golden Lion is dead has been confirmed. As for Sorata, through a short fight with me, I know that this guy should have eaten a space-type fruit, and can use the fruit's ability to teleport and fly. I don't know the rest for the time being." Then Kizaru's jaw went up, and the famous words came out. "It's terrible. Marshal Sengoku, if there is nothing wrong, I will apply to return home." "Yeah. Thank you, Paluzolino Admiral." Saying that, Sengoku hung up the phone. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes. Even though he had been prepared for a long time, when he really heard the news of the death of the Golden Lion, he still felt a bit stunned. 17 years old, top in the world, and a pirate, this silver-haired person may be more dangerous than the Golden Lion. This reminded him of a person who was also extremely powerful at the age of 17. Former member of the Roger Pirates, known as Devil's Bullet, of Devil Descendants. Ha 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 ha. At this moment, Garp laughed and said, "It's really amazing. He actually killed the Golden Lion. He is indeed a man from East Blue." Ha 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 ha. As he spoke, he gave a thumbs up to the Sorata bounty on the blackboard behind Sengoku. To be honest, he doesn't dislike Sorata. After all, judging from Sorata's current actions, he doesn't see any thoughts that can threaten Marine. In terms of threats, it is also world government. The threat of the world government has nothing to do with him as a Marine. Isn't it? Garp. Sengoku scolded Garp, who was laughing in tears. Then he raised his head and scanned around the conference room, and his last gaze landed on since it has been confirmed that the Golden Lion is dead, let's talk about the latest reward offered by your staff in light of the threat level of the Silver Hair. The bounties offered by pirates like Sorata are no longer simply determined by individuals. Not only does it need to be discussed by the Marine staff, but it must also be reported to the world government, and finally the world government will make the final decision. The crane hunched over, propped its chin with both hands, and a gleam of light flashed in its dim eyes. "Advertisement," she calmly said, "according to the result of the consultation previously estimated by the staff department, Silver Hair Sorata can be given." She paused and then said, 500 million rewards. 500 million? It's really scary. If I remember correctly, Silver Hair was offered a reward of 70 million just a few days ago. This is truly unprecedented. Although everyone in the conference room knew that the reward offered by silver-haired Sorata this time would not be too low, they were still amazed when they heard 500 million. Silver-haired Sorata can be said to be the pirate with the fastest bounty increase. In just a few days, it increased from 70 million to 500 million. What is certain now is that silver-haired Sorata's reputation will definitely resound throughout the world in the fastest time. Boom. Sengoku punched the ground in front of him, attracting everyone's attention. He looked at the crowd and said, given the strength of silver-haired Sorata, no one can stop him in the first half of the Grand Line. He glanced around and then said a cruel sentence. Of course, including our Marine. Sengoku. Suru looked at Sengoku and couldn't help but speak. Sengoku interrupted Suru with his hand, and then said seriously, it's not that Marine is incapable of arresting the silver-haired gang. Judging from the fact that silver-haired Sorata can fly, we don't have much force to arrest him right now. If you really want to arrest him, you have to dispatch at least 2 admirals to have a chance to arrest him successfully. And now the situation in New World is a bit delicate. It is impossible for us to use 2 admiral-level fighters to hunt down the silver-haired gang. He pushed the frame of the mirror, and the light of wisdom flashed in his eyes, and he continued. So, now we are trying to find a way to get Silver-Hair to go to New World as soon as possible, and fight the monsters in New World. Talking about what he thought of, he asked by the way, is Yinfa in Rog Town now? Okay. Hurry up and call the Colonel Smoker in Rog Town. Tell him not to be impulsive. Just turn a blind eye and let the silver-haired gang go to the Grand Line earlier. This guy is notoriously problematic Marine. Otherwise, a Logia fruit-capable user and a student of Zephyr would not have been sent to East Blue to guard the town of Rog. He didn't want this guy to make unnecessary sacrifices. The current silver hair was no longer something ordinary Marine generals could handle. Advertisement. Then he stood up, waited for everyone to stand up, and then said, "Okay, today's meeting is like this. After you go back, you and the generals in the first half of the branch will let them go if they meet the silver-haired group. This is an order from the ministry." Yes. Everyone gave a military salute to Sengoku. Sengoku glanced at the crowd, and then shouted loudly, "In the name of absolute justice, I announce that the meeting is adjourned." Then he left the conference room first. He also has to go to Marijoy and 5 elders to report the results of today's meeting, so that he can release the new reward order for silver-hair Sorata as soon as possible. In less than 2 hours, Sorata's new reward order appeared in the Marine base in Rogtown, and then the entire Marine base. The last is the World News Economic News Agency, headquarters of World News Economic Newspaper. President's office. The plump Morgans, wearing a black cloak and a red feather top hat, was full of excitement, his eyes staring excitedly at a reward order on the desk in front of him. This guy is an ability user of bird fruit albatross form. Since he has been in the form of an orc, no one knows his true appearance. The guy is most interested in big news. And the reward order in front of him and the photos secretly taken by his subordinates are unprecedented big news for the whole world. That's amazing. Killing the Golden Lion. He stared at the few sneak shots next to the reward order, showing the photos of Sky Island, Golden Lion and Sorata fighting, his whole body trembling with excitement. And this guy's bounty is really scary. The second bounty has reached 500 million. Even though he knew that Sorata deserved it, he was still amazed. He had never seen such a percentage increase. He has already thought of the title of this big news, so he called it. The pirate with the largest bounty increase in history, the fastest pirate, beheaded the legendary Golden Lion, and thus reached the top of the new generation of legendary pirate, Silverhair Sorata. Thinking of this, he couldn't help laughing out loud, quack quack quack. Then he grabbed the photo and the reward order, walked out of the office, and yelled at the newspaper employees waiting outside. "Little ones, hurry up and take action. This time, I will let the silver-haired reward order and our news appear in the world as quickly as possible." Following Morgan's order, the entire newspaper office turned quickly. Not long. The newspaper delivery birds fly to the whole world carrying the newly released news that is destined to shock the whole world. Chapter 59. Hearing too much chicken soup, you know it by yourself. Town of Rog. Here, there was no sound, ding. When the tense and quiet atmosphere was relaxed, people couldn't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva. "If you want my knife, you must at least have the strength to match this knife." Kuina held a knife in her right hand and sheathed the knife. "With your current strength, how can you take my knife away from me?" Without even looking at Tashigi, she strolled past her, toward Smoker. She has only one goal now, and that is to fight the strong and reach the great swordsman as soon as possible. Tashigi stood stiffly where she was, and didn't relax until Kuina walked by. The moment the blade approached just now, the fear of death was like a black hole, sucking her whole mind into it. Now that death is far away, as soon as her tense spirit is relaxed, her whole body is like ooze, and she instantly collapses to the ground. "Sergeant Tashigi, are you alright?" A Marine looked at Tashigi who was lying on the ground, and hurried over, reaching out to help her up, but she refused. "I'm fine." She turned her head to look at Kuina's back, and shouted angrily, "Blue-hair Kuina, why don't you cut me off? Because I am an ordinary person and a woman, and my natural strength is no match for you monsters. You can fight in a duel, it would be too shameful for me to put water in it." "Oh." Kuina stopped and turned to look at Tashigi with a hint of doubt in her eyes. This character is a bit like her childhood, could it be her relatives? She quickly dismissed the thought, impossible. She stared at Tashigi and said something very cruel and differently. "How pitiful, the weak. Now, you can't even choose your own death. If you want to achieve your goal, you have to work 10,000 times harder." Tashigi stood up stubbornly, walked to Sayashiu, and pulled out the knife with a choke. "I practice knives, not for fun. I have been working hard, practicing hard." Advertisement. She raised her hand, pointed at Kuina with a knife, and shouted, "I am a weak person. How can you people who are born with strong physiques understand the persistence of ordinary people like us? Also, do you monsters really think you are strong? Don't be too presumptuous. My belief cannot be dispelled by you in a few words." As she said that, she roared and rushed towards Kuina quickly. Apparently, Kuina's sarcasm for the underdog completely d off Tashigi. Seeing Tashigi rushing towards her quickly, Kuina was taken aback. It's so similar, even she herself thought that the opposite was herself. Tashigi is exactly the same as her personality a few years ago. Then a flash of anger flashed in her eyes, she turned around quickly, and blocked Tashigi's blow with a knife. Clang. Kuina looked at the face close at hand and roared loudly. "You guy not only imitated my face, but even my personality." "Who imitated you? I have been like this since I was a child. If you want to imitate, you must imitate me." "What? Do you really want to die, woman?" Kuina pushed Tashigi away with her right hand, quickly raised the knife and swung it downward, with a sound of clang, and knocked Xiaoyi away for the second time. "Also, don't always imitate how I speak, especially when I was a child. You made me feel ashamed for a moment like that, you know?" Then she quickly sheathed the knife, took a few steps forward, and instantly got close to standing in front of Tashigi. Then he grabbed Tashigi's collar in front of him, pushed upwards, and then fell over his shoulder. Boom! Tashigi lay on the ground, stupefied by Kuina's movements. Before she could recover, Kuina straddled her in an instant, pulled his collar, and pulled her head in front of her. With a gloomy face, Kuina stared into Tashigi's eyes and said loudly, "What's wrong with the woman? Tell me what's wrong with the woman." Tashigi came back to his senses and stared at Kuina with stubbornness in his eyes. "You and I both know that as long as you are not born with a strong physique, a woman will never be able to compare with a man in terms of strength." "Who told you that? Aren't I just a woman? Am I not strong enough?" Advertisement. Kuina lowered her head, put her forehead on Tashigi's forehead, and shouted angrily, "Who told you that women must be inferior to men? Since you know you can't compare, then go 100 times, 1,000 times to catch up. Don't feel sorry for yourself here, Kuina." Sorata saw that Kuina's mood was a little bit wrong, and couldn't help shouting. Kuina raised her head, put away the anger on her face, and looked at Sorata with a smile on her lips. "Don't worry, Sorata, I'm fine." Tashigi did irritate her a bit, especially since the guy looked exactly like her. Although she doesn't care much about the distinction between men and women these years, sometimes she still has the idea that she is not as good as a man, and it suddenly pops up. In fact, when she left Seymour GG Village, she knew that Zoro had surpassed her in strength. To be honest, regarding this point, even though she knew that such a day would come, she still felt a little bit unwilling in her heart. Zoro is 1 year younger than her, and usually trains like her, and now he can surpass her in strength after that. She shook her head. "I didn't think about it so much. Sorata was right, power stuff, easy, it depends on how you choose. Since you have chosen this path, then go forward bravely, so that every day of your life is not in vain. If you can surpass your previous self every day, then every day of your life is actually your strongest. This infinitely superimposed power will one day allow you to realize your dreams." This is indeed Sorata's chicken soup. He has said so many chicken soups over the years, so many that he can't remember them all. Kuina loosened her hands and loosened Tashigi's collar, looked down at Tashigi and said softly, "I used to get overwhelmed by not being a boy, but when I got over that, I came out stronger. Although women are inferior to men in terms of strength, there is still a kind of strength that must not be inferior to men. That's strength of will." Saying this, she stood up, walked past Tashigi, and walked back towards Smoker. "People, you can lose everything, but you can't lose your confidence in the future. I feel your determination. I hope that one day, you can come to me and snatch my knife again. And I, in the position of the strongest female swordsman, will wait for every opponent who comes to challenge me." As she spoke, she paused. "Also, I'm not a monster born with a strong physique. If you say this, it will appear that my hard work in the past 10 years is like a fool. Also, don't use your own life to set other people's lives on. I am also pursuing my dream, and I never stop." Chapter 60 Logia Ability User. White Hunter Smoker, the last opponent to the Grand Line. Kuina walked to a distance of 4 or 5 meters from Smoker and shouted loudly, "Please show all your strength and fight me, or you will die." This is what she and Sorata agreed earlier. Smoker is a Logia Smoke Fruit ability user. Playing against Logia not only earns experience, but also trains observation hockey. She just got it from Sorata, hockey's advanced training technique, and has been wanting to try it for a long time. Smoker glanced at Tashigi, then looked up at Kuina. The veins on the forehead popped out. "1 or 2, take him seriously. Do you really think that he is the title of White Hunter himself?" He glanced at Sorata with his eyes. "Well, don't worry, I won't interfere." Sorata leaned on his motorcycle, picked up the wine gourd, and took a sip with his head up. He raised his head. The wine gourd was hanging upside down, shaking up and down. 1 drop, 2 drops, it was gone. "Hey, it's hard." Then he shouted to the 3 of Awa. "Hey, let's go to buy supplies first." "Oh, well. The 3 of Ahua were stunned, and hurried towards Sorata. "Stop, who told you to move?" The surrounding Marines quickly turned their guns and aimed at the 3 of Ahua. "Well, it's terrible." Sorata turned her head, stared at Smoker, and smiled slightly. "Colonel Smoker, can I trouble you to let these Marines put away their guns? Weapon or something, it's scary. Pirate, pay attention to your identity, don't be too arrogant." Smoker looked at Sorata, and shouted fiercely, "Action, shoot me, and arrest these pirates." The Marines, who had been waiting impatiently for a long time, immediately pulled the trigger when they heard Smoker's order. Boom, snapped, then countless black solid bullets hit the 3 of Awa like a net, covering the sky and covering the sky. Sorata looked at Smoker, frowning, and a hint of anger flashed in her eyes. "I've said it all, don't use such a dangerous weapon, why don't you listen? You really think I dare not kill people, don't you?" Then a domineering momentum swept across the entire pier, and the bullets fired at the 3 of Ahua stopped in place as soon as they entered the space 20 meters away from Sorata. Advertisement. The whole pier, instantly, was clean. Then Marine on the pier and the crowd watching the fun rolled their eyes and fell to the ground with a bang. Conqueror's Hockey. Smoker stared at Sorata in horror. This is definitely the Conqueror's Hockey, the hockey that only 1 person in a million can awaken. Sorata puts away hockey, and the field. In the sound of ding ding ding, he looked at Smoker. "I've said it all, but if you don't listen, can't you be obedient?" Smoker suppressed the horror in his eyes and stared at Sorata gravely. "A man like you, why do you only go to sea now? How could this guy just go to sea now? With the posture of a king and such a strong strength, how did he endure it for so long before going to sea? Me? Sorata looked at Smoker, smiling again. Of course I'm underage? He looked at Smoker and said strangely, don't they all go to sea when they are adults? He remembered Luffy, Ace, Zoro, all of them were adults who went to sea. Adult. The corner of Smoker's mouth twitched, and he didn't expect Sorata to answer this way, which made him speechless for a moment. Yes, you only go to sea when you are an adult. Sorata nodded. As soon as I turned 17, I went to sea immediately, and I didn't miss a day. Then he stared at Smoker solemnly, and asked curiously, don't you want me to go to sea earlier, so that you can defeat me? As he said that, he patted Smoker on the shoulder and laughed loudly. Haha, don't be kidding, for you, even my 10-year-old age is not something you can beat. You be asterisk 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 D. Smoker opened Sorata's hand, pulled out 10 hands with his right hand, and quickly inserted towards Sorata. Don't be too arrogant, have you become angry from embarrassment? Sorata teleported directly in front of the three of Awa, and smiled at Smoker. What I said is the truth, don't be so stingy. And your opponent is not me, if you are not careful, you will get hurt. Just when Smoker started to strike, Kuina had already drawn out the words of Hidao, held the knife in both hands, raised it above his head, and stepped on the ground quickly. With a sound of whoosh, it disappeared in place in an instant. Advertisement, shave slash. In an instant, Kuina appeared on the side of Smoker. At this time, Smoker just swung 10 hands and was too late to return to the defense, so he took a solid knife from Kuina. I saw Hidao use words, instantly cut Smoker away, turned around from below him, and was cut by Kuina. Okay. There is no entity at all. Kuina looked up at Smoker and saw white smoke coming out of the place where Smoker was cut open by her, but there was no trace of bloodline. Is this Logia? Amazing. Smoker unhurriedly withdrew his 10 hands, spit out the cigarette holder in his mouth, pulled 2 cigars from his chest, held them in his mouth, and lit them. He took a deep breath and looked at Kuina's brows almost frowning together. Shave. You guys know Marine 6 styles. His eyes fixed, and he said seriously, who taught you? He was a little suspicious now, whether there was someone behind the silver-haired gang who had betrayed Marine's senior general. Are you talking about this kind of high-speed moving move? Kuina looked at Smoker, who suddenly became extremely serious, and said extremely mocking words in an indifferent tone. This is not training, will it happen automatically? Stop kidding, do you know that in the entire Marine, only senior generals can learn and master these skills? Smoker doesn't believe Kuina's nonsense at all. Okay, let me tell you whether you want to fight or not. Hawking, it's not straightforward at all, if you don't come, I will come. As he said that, Kuina looked at Smoker, his eyes flashed red, and he quickly drew his knife. One knife flow, draw the knife and chop. I saw a saber light, cutting towards Smoker quickly. Smoker didn't dare to use his body to catch it hard this time, he sensed the breath of armament hockey on this knife. He quickly withdrew his hands, the 10 hands in his hand were in front of him, and with a clang, they were just in front of Kuina's blade. Then, in a burst of sparks, his 10-handed fork twisted, and the word Hidao was instantly stuck. Don't think that you can beat that stupid woman like Toshigi and ignore me, Colonel of Naval Headquarters. As he spoke, his other hand quickly elementalized and hit Kuina on the head. White snake. There was a red light in Kuina's eyes, and he turned his head to the left, easily dodging the punch. Then she pushed down hard with both hands, and Smoker loosened all 10 hands. During this slack, she quickly pulled out the word Hidao, turned around, and quickly slashed at the returning white snake head. Puff, the snake's head was cut off, but it was the same as before. Did not cut to the real thing. Chapter 61 I used to be a genius student in the eyes of teachers and others. Good chance. Watching Kuina turn around, Smoker held 10 hands in his right hand, drew back, and then thrust towards Kuina's back at an even faster speed. Kuina sensed the sharp edge behind her, and it was too late to turn around. Her legs stepped on the ground, and with a whoosh, she disappeared in place and appeared on the side of Smoker. Don't look down on people, I will shave, too. As he said that, Smoker also flickered for a while, and the 10 hands in his hand were still thrusting towards Kuina. Seeing the oncoming 10 hands, Kuina didn't dodge at all. She hid there for a while, mainly to face it head-on. A red light flashed in her eyes, her body turned to the right side, her arms brushed past her hands. Then she quickly raised the knife, which was covered with armament hockey, and slashed towards Smoker's open chest. A cold knife light flashed like moonlight, boom. This time it was cut on the entity. Smoker's chest was covered with armor color, and he took advantage of this moment to quickly elementalize, but Kuina's blade was too fast and easily cut through his armament hockey defense. His armed color has just awakened, it can only be hardened, not even entangled. So it couldn't stop Kuina's fierce knife, puff. Although he escaped most of the damage by elementalization, he was still cut with a huge wound on his chest by this knife. The wound was not deep, and it was bleeding out continuously. Smoker took a few steps back, all elemental except for his head. He stared at Kuina, solemnly said, Observation hockey. It's amazing. Observation hockey is an ability that he hasn't even comprehended yet. This is not the new world where armed men are as numerous as dogs and knowledgeable men can be seen everywhere. It's just East Blue here. Since he was sent to Rog Town, he rarely used armament hockey with Logia's almost invincible ability in the first half of the Grand Line. This made him usually neglect the training of hockey. He didn't even comprehend something that senior Marine generals could comprehend, such as knowledge and knowledge. But when he felt the aching wound on his chest, he regretted it. He shouldn't have gotten so wrapped up in Logia's false invulnerability that he neglected to buff hockey. If he can also observation hockey, Kuina must not be able to cut his body. He stared at Kuina and put away his 10 hands, then both hands and legs turned into fists and rushed towards Kuina. White Fist. Facing the Swordmaster who has observation hockey, he can only use long-range attacks now to see if he can defeat Kuina. His hockey can't defend against the opponent's slash, and he will definitely lose in melee. Seeing the white fists approaching rapidly, Kuina's eyes flashed red, and she swayed from side to side, dodging these fists easily. Then he retracted the knife, leaned forward, put his right hand on the handle of the knife, and fixed his eyes on Smoker floating in the air. Kick off your feet. Advertisement disappeared in an instant, appearing behind Smoker in the blink of an eye. Ding, slash all things with one blow. With a swipe of the knife, it easily cut through Smoker's body. It's dangerous, just a little bit, he will be cut in half. Smoker looked at Kuina, sweating all over his body. When the knife light came, he felt the breath of death. He quickly elementalized his whole body, wrapping the entire street in smoke. His smoke has no attack power and can only confuse the enemy. Although Logia can use the elementalization of his whole body to avoid any attack and achieve false invincibility, but after elementalization, he cannot attack the enemy. And the elementalization of the whole body is also very labor-intensive. Therefore, users with Logia fruit ability generally seldom use the elementalization of the whole body, and it is enough to elementalize the attack part in advance at the moment of the attack. Of course, for those who have developed the fruit ability to a very high level, they can basically passively elementize the enemy's attack in advance to avoid the attack. These guys don't even need knowledge. Of course, for people with a particularly high level of knowledge, passive is useless. Because the opposite side is one step faster than what you see. And Logia ability users want to attack the enemy only after the body is solidified. Therefore, the best way to fight Logia is to stay calm and respond to all changes. If you don't look for him, he must come and fight you in order to attack you. Of course, this can only be achieved when fighting against smoke fruit, a fruit that has no elemental damage at all. When fighting against magma, flames, lightning, and ice, these fruits that truly represent the power of nature are useless. Because these fruits not only have ultra-high and ultra-distance attacks, their attacks can even change the sky. Elementalization has real damage. No harm? Like, maybe, just, only smoke fruit. This is a bit funny. It is worthy of being called the most useless Logia fruit. I feel that even giving Smoker, marsh fruit, should be better than this smoke fruit. This guy's fruit ability seems to be the only fruit that elementalizes without harm. In the first half of the Grand Line, it can still be said that it is invincible. Because most of the pirates in the first half haven't awakened hockey yet, they can't hurt Logia's real body. And this guy's fruit development has not reached the level where he can passively avoid hockey. Coupled with the fact that they don't know the color of knowledge, they may not be able to react to the fast attack, especially the strong ones who have the color of knowledge, and thus take the initiative to avoid it. And Kuina is a player who can do both. So this guy, if he is not careful, he will end up in a real fiasco. Looking at the surrounding smoke, Kuina's eyes flashed red. Found it. She quickly moved forward to the left, and slashed 2 silver-white slashes, then kicked her feet on the ground, and rushed forward following the slashes. Smoker, who was hiding in the smoke, looked at the oncoming slash with a flash of contempt in his eyes. Looks like the great swordsman hasn't arrived yet. Advertisement: he is basically immune to the sword hero's slash. Okay. Just when he was struck by 2 slashes, cutting through the smoke and revealing his human form. Suddenly Kuina emerged from behind the 2 slashes. The knife in his hand didn't stop, with the purple-black blade of the armed color attached, flashed a quiet cold light, and in Smoker's horrified eyes, quickly slashed at his chest. Shaving one sword-style god slash, she knows all the sword skills that Sorata knows. Puff! Smoker's elemental body was directly cut out of the main body by this knife, and then under a strong impact, he rushed towards the rear quickly. With a bang, it crashed through a house and then hit another street. Colonel Smoker. Tashigi wasn't stunned by Sorata's conqueror's hockey, she stared at the giant hole in the wall of the house on the right. A look of horror. In her heart, Smoker is synonymous with invincibility. She never expected to be slashed in the body by blue-hair Kuina, and now she is even more likely to be severely injured. How could it be so strong? Is this what I'm after? She was brazenly trying to grab the opponent's knife just now. She shook her head, looking at Kuina firmly. No matter how strong it is, my belief will not be lost to anyone. Smoker on the other street, clutching his chest, sat up. Is this the strength of a real swordsman? It's terrible. He glanced at the blood on his hand, took out the cigarette, took a deep breath, put his hands on his knees, and stood up. It looks like I'm going to work hard. He couldn't remember how long he hadn't worked hard. Since he came to Rog Town, he seemed to be the king here. No pirate is not afraid of him. He is the strongest door to the Grand Line in East Blue, and the thickest shield for the civilians here. He couldn't lose, at least not so easily. He glanced at the fallen civilians on the street, looked up at the white clouds in the sky, and thought of his teacher. Zephyr, who kept talking. If a person relies too much on fruit ability, then he will definitely not become a real strong person in the end. Because every strong person should believe in himself the most, and believe that he can overcome everything. This power of belief will make a person, even an ordinary person, stronger. Thinking of this, he held 10 hands, raised them in front of him, and shook them hard. A stream of black hockey continuously emerged from his arm, and finally wrapped around 10 hands. Armed color, entanglement? He looked up through the huge hole in the house and looked at Kuina across the way. Thank you so much, blue hair Kuina, thank you for waking me up and letting me find the competitive spirit I had lost for a long time. He was also a gifted student in the eyes of teachers and others. Chapter 62 The Tavern named Gold D. Roger. Okay. Looking at the weapon in Smoker's hand, Kuina's eyes flickered with seriousness. Entangled. This guy had just fought her, and his weaponry was just getting started, so he couldn't defend against her slash. Now I actually learned to rap. It seems that she is not the only one who is improving, Smoker is also improving in battle. She looked at Smoker, and with a flick of her right hand, the bloodline above him was thrown away. Then sheathed the knife and leaned forward, eyes fixed on Smoker. So what if he learns to entangle? He is the most powerful swordsman. Not to mention entanglement, no matter how strong the defense is, she can still cut it. Hey, Smoky Man, come here, do you want to fight me on that street? Smoker smoked, his legs turned elemental, and he rushed directly towards Kuina. There's nothing to talk about now, just the fight. Seeing Smoker rushing out of the hole in the house, Kuina drew the knife and slashed straight at him. Clang, guarded. The reason for her fighting is the same as that of Sorata, to increase combat experience, attribute moves, and condense hockey. Since Smoker can defend against her slash, he can fight with her and be her whetstone. Nor is she in a hurry to beat him. Raise your hand quickly, then swing at an even faster speed. The sound of dang dang can be heard endlessly. On the other hand, Smoker's whole body is elemental, and his whole body keeps flashing in the smoke, condensing his hands from time to time, holding up the 10 hands wrapped around armament hockey, and attacking Kuina. Let's go. Let's go buy all the supplies. Seeing the two who would be unable to tell the winner for a while, Sorata yawned, put his hands in his trouser pockets, and walked towards the town first. He hadn't slept for 2 days, if it wasn't for watching the scenes that appeared most in One Piece anime, and replenishing the food on the boat that was eaten up by the villagers on Prush Island. He didn't even want to land in Rog. Take a look at the execution platform, grab a drink, and head straight for the Grand Line. He couldn't wait any longer. Thinking about his lazy pace seemed to speed up. The three of Ahua were stunned for a moment and hurriedly followed. Ahua pushed the frame of the mirror, looked at the street shrouded in smoke, and heard the collision sound from time to time, and said, not waiting for Kuina. He was not worried that Kuina would get hurt, because with Sorata around, no one could hurt Kuina. Since Sorata said to replenish supplies, it proves that the smoking man must not be able to defeat Kuina. No, Sorata waved his hand and continued to move forward. When we come back, it will be good if they can finish the fight. Let's go. I'll go to the tavern in the execution platform to see you. As usual, we will gather here in 2 hours. Standing at the intersection of the street, Sorata continued to move forward, while the three of Ahua separated and went to buy the list of supplies that had been allocated. Advertisement. Creak. In a dim alley, the door of a tavern named Gold D. Roger was suddenly gently pushed open from the outside to the inside. The ear-piercing sound from the old wooden door caused the noisy tavern to be silent for a moment, and then returned to its original state. Sorata put her hands in her hands, ignored the noise of the pirates on both sides, and walked straight to the bar of the tavern. Looking at the unusually old man behind the bar with gold-round earrings and small sunglasses, he smiled. Boss, with this name for the bar, aren't you afraid that others will trouble you? Okay. The boss stretched out his right hand, raised it to his face, clasped his index finger down on the middle frame of the sunglasses, and pulled it down, revealing his eyes full of vicissitudes behind. My tavern, what name do you want to name? Do you still care about other people's ideas? Yeah. Sorata nodded and sat on the chair in front of the bar. That's right. After all, the One Piece, Gordy. Roger, can be said to have started from here. He stared at the boss with a smile on his lips. Am I right, sir? The boss took out a wine glass and wiped it slowly, completely ignoring Sorata's words. Old things, everyone knows about it, so what's worth paying attention to? He raised his head, stared at Sorata and said, it's you, little brother, and why? And the one who went to sea. Me? Sorata put his hands on the bar, crossed his palms, and put his head on the back of his hands. After thinking for a while, the corners of his mouth suddenly turned up and he smiled evilly. Me? I'm planning to go for a walk on the Grand Line. What? The old man's dark eyes suddenly lit up, and then his face was full of surprise. Sorata looked at the old man's reaction, a smile flashed in his eyes, and then he spoke. Thinking of this, I'm so excited, no matter how terrifying that sea area is to other people. I'm not afraid of these legends. Sorata paused, seeing the old man's eyes getting bigger and bigger, he yelled out Luffy's famous words. I'm going to Grand Line, to find One Piece, then become One Piece. The whole tavern was silent, and then there was a shocking laughter. Ha 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 ha. You heard me right, with your small body, you dare to say that you want to be the One Piece without shame. Who do you think you are? Ha 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 ha, what Sorata said in the first half is true, but he is not so interested in One Piece and One Piece. Advertisement. He is not capable of saving the world. Sorata ignored the laughter behind him. These pirates can only stay in East Blue for a lifetime. Well, no, because they're going to hell soon. When the boss was in a daze, a tall pirate walked up behind Sorata. He was reeking of alcohol and was holding a huge wine bottle in his hand. When he got behind Sorata, he roared and smashed Sorata's head. Little ghost, pirates are not just a house playing game, One Piece or something, it's up to you. You think too much. What these guys can't do and dare not do by themselves, they take it for granted that others are the same as them. So what these pirates can't stand the most is that others show off their dreams in front of them. Because these guys never thought of having a dream. Maybe there was once, but it was smoothed out by the sea. Therefore, I also hate others to have it, and it can also be said that I am afraid that others will also have dreams. Red light flashed in Sorata's eyes, and he dodged to the right, easily dodging the wine bottle. The bottle hit the bar with a loud smack, and shards and alcohol splashed everywhere. The fragments flying towards Sorata automatically stopped in the air as if inserted into jelly. Sorata is not a red-haired person, but the big thief opened his head with a wine bottle and even let him go. In the end, he lost an arm. This is karma. If there is no king of thieves, maybe Luffy would not have a straw hat. In the future, I can't be called the Straw Hat Boy, but should be called the Rubber Boy. Thinking of this, Sorata couldn't help laughing out loud. Ha 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 ha, then he turned around and stared at the tall pirate standing behind him. He would not let these guys go. As soon as he came in, he sensed a strong smell of blood on them. These guys should have been robbing for a long time. When I came to the town of Rog, I only dared to go to the remote tavern instead of the middle street. A group of low-level but most cruel pirates. The tall pirate stood there in horror, trembling all over. Just when he finished smashing the wine bottle, he was locked on by Sorata's aura. He felt that his soul was about to be pushed out of his body by this sudden aura. His eyes widened in horror, trying to make a sound, but he couldn't. Sorata turned the stool under his buttocks, turned around, and stood up slowly. Compared with the pirate in front of him, his height seemed a bit short. But the mood is completely different. The other pirates in the tavern had stopped laughing at this time. They all stared at Sorata, their hands reached for their weapons, and their faces were cruel. Chapter 63 The Beginning of a Legend. What right do you have to look down on me? Sorata looked at the tall pirate in front of him, stretched out her hand, and patted him lightly on the shoulder. Boom, the tall pirate immediately knelt down on the ground. Hey, Keelij, what are you doing? A dragon pirate at the back shouted at Chilia, the tall pirate in front of Sorata, don't kill this guy yet. At this moment, all the pirates realized something was wrong. I saw Chilia kneeling in front of Sorata, with his head raised, his eyes glazed over, and a stream of urine flowed out from his crotch. Then the whole person let out a roar that was so terrified that it was ultimate, and passed out directly. I don't know what this guy saw, so terrified. Sorata looked at Chilia, a trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. It's bad luck. This guy looked so brave, but he didn't know he was so timid. He was scared to pee by his conqueror's haki. He was on this guy just now, trying to control the range of conqueror's haki. Who knows that he just showed a little bit? This guy is like that. You guy, what did you do to Chilia? The pirates behind looked at Chilia, who fell to the ground for no reason, and yelled at Sorata sternly. As if this could drive away the fear in their hearts at this moment. This guy didn't even make a move, he just patted Chilia lightly. Chilia was scared to pee, and passed out. It's too scary. Just then, there was a pop. One of the guys couldn't help but shoot Sorata directly. Seeing that their companions had made a move, the rest of the pirates roared in unison and rushed towards Sorata. Let's fall down. Sorata didn't plan to play with them anymore, or to tease the boss here. He directly cooked the pirates after drinking. He didn't even look at the bullets fired at him, and the conqueror's haki swept across the entire tavern in an instant under his control, except for the old man. And the bullet that shot at him hit the outside of his skin with a bang, as if hitting a transparent wall, and couldn't move forward anymore. Then, together with the pirates who rolled their eyes, they fell to the ground. The boss has been staring at Sorata ever since Sorata said the same thing as Roger. He is about to die, and he is not afraid of anyone or anything, except for this era created by Roger. There are no brave pirates who can continue to challenge the Grand Line. But today he saw it. He looked at Sorata as he looked at Roger once. Watching Sorata sit back on the stool, he tore off the hat on his head, revealing the light purple thinning hair on his head. It's really shameless. How dare you say such a thing in this store? I'm just saying what's natural. Sorata looked at the old man and chuckled lightly. Advertisement, haha. You don't think I'm joking? I've never done such a boring thing. Oh, yes? Then the old man laughed out loud. Hey, since I can meet a guest like you, kid, I think I can live a few more years. I thought I would never see someone who could challenge the sea of magic like Roger. Is that so? Sorata took out the wine gourd and pushed it in front of the boss. In this case, can you trouble the boss to help me fill up the strongest wine you have here, and give me a discounted price? Discount? Looking at the wine gourd in front of him, the old man was puzzled for a while, and then his face became serious. Little ghost, don't even think about it. Even if Roger comes to me, he will still pay the original price. If you want a discount, you are still 100 years too early. Oh, Sorata lay down on the bar in an instant, as if her entire body had been stripped of all energy. He looked at the old man and muttered in a low voice. Just now I seem to admire me very much, so everything is fake. He thought he would get a discount on the old man's wine by saying Roger's words and Juan Luffy's words. Okay, boy, for the sake of being so happy today, let me buy you a drink. As he spoke, he took out 2 wine glasses from behind the bar and poured 2 glasses of wine. A cup is pushed in front of Sorata. What's the matter, boy, this is the best wine I have here. The old man smiled. If I'm not in a good mood today, you think you can drink it, don't lie on your stomach, let's have a toast. When Sorata heard that it was a good wine, or the best wine, she instantly regained her spirits. He quickly reached out to pick up the wine glass, with a smile on his face. Raised a glass with the old man, for the adventure, for the grand line. The old man said loudly, for One Piece Roger, cheers. Ha 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 ha, hey hey, gudong gudong. On the way to Rog's Central Square, the execution platform, Sorata carried a large wine jar on her back, walking forward with a flushed face. That old man is really good. Advertisement. He stood unsteadily at the gate of the square. Belch, although the old man said he wanted a glass of wine, but after drinking a glass of wine, he unconsciously compared wine with Sorata. As the man got old, he talked endlessly. As soon as he drank, he heard a lot about Roger's past. Looking up at the execution platform in the distance, a smile flashed in Sorata's eyes. It never occurred to him that Roger was a copy of Luffy when he was a child, even more mischievous. Sure enough, they're the owners of the same hat. Okay. Why is red hair different? Sorata stroked her chin and thought about it. Sure enough, is the hat the protagonist? The red hair is a toolman passing the hat, of course it is different. He shook his head to dispel the random thoughts that suddenly popped up in his mind, then raised his head and stared at the execution platform, lost in thought for a while. It seemed that the beginning of the anime that he had watched hundreds or thousands of times appeared before his eyes again. Goldie Roger, the picture before death. Want to get my treasure? I can give you all you want, go find it. I put all the treasures there. The final frame was fixed on the guy laughing. In order to continue his dream, this guy started the chaotic era of great pirates. People die. Sorata doesn't comment too much. What he can think of is, can people really give up their lives for their dreams? It's unbelievable, but the answer is yes. In this superficially passionate, but actually very cruel world. It seems that everyone is struggling for the big and small dreams in their hearts. There is no distinction between good and evil, good or bad. Sorata tore off the wine gourd, raised her head and took a sip. Who cares? Since he came to this world, there must be his legend in this world. Ha 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 ha, Sorata burst into laughter, then disappeared in place in an instant, appearing on the execution platform. Turning around and looking at the square full of people, there was excitement in his eyes. Whether it's the 4 emperors or the marine, whether it's celestial dragons, or whatever wait for Master Sorata to come and appreciate it. Now that he has come to this world, he will go to every place he wants to visit, of course including the last island, Loudale, One Piece. Chapter 64. Let's go to the Grand Line Rog Town, Marina. The 3 of Ahua were carrying things to the Freedom, box by box. Food, weapons, clothes. Everything, of course the most is fresh water, and carrots. In order to buy as many carrots as possible, the 3 of Ahua can be said to have finished the vegetable market in Rog Town. And around them, there is a circle of marine far away. This time the Marines learned to be smart and didn't raise their guns. Their colonel was still fighting the second in command on the street. It seems that it is still at a disadvantage. Apart from them, there are no civilians on the pier now, and the entire pier has been blocked by Marine. Calical, can you buy so many carrots and eat them all? Indigo stood by the side of the boat, helping to carry the supplies with ropes. He looked at a deck full of radishes and laughed. I don't know, I thought how many rabbits we had on board. Calical, don't laugh. Awa pushed his eyes, looked at the carrot box in his arms, and nodded with satisfaction. These are the treasures that we have become stronger. He can't wait to start his training career with a carrot. Since childhood, the 3 of them thought about training with Sorata like Kuina and Zoro. When I was young, due to poor physical fitness, I didn't realize it. As a result, their strength can now be described as rubbish. But it's different now. He jumped into the boat and looked at the carrot mountain in front of him, his eyes were red with excitement. Thinking of becoming stronger in the future, 2 rabbit ears popped out of his head involuntarily. Then, in a puff of white smoke, with a bang, the whole person turned into a fat rabbit walking upright. This guy hasn't controlled the fruit ability well yet, and if he gets too emotional, he will involuntarily turn into a rabbit. Can't even maintain human animal form. Hey, what are you guys doing? Aluo looked at Awa. A trace of dissatisfaction flashed in his eyes. Do you want to steal it again? Awa stole a basket on the way. If he and Adao hadn't been watching, they felt that this pile of radishes definitely wasn't enough for this guy's daily supply. After eating the fruit, he and Ahua instantly became the king of Big Belly. He who usually eats the least food is now the person who eats the most food on the boat. According to Sorata, they're typically only starting to develop now. The more you eat, the faster you grow. Kuina is still fighting. Adao was standing beside the boat with a bundle of planks, smoking a cigarette, and watching Kuina and Smoker who were still fighting. This smoking man, as expected of the person guarding the largest marine base in East Blue, has been able to fight Kuina until now. He turned and set the plank up beside the boat, looking at the boat. Hey, you two guys, don't be dazed. If you don't help, get it done soon. We'll set off when Sorata comes back. As he spoke, he shook his head, held a cigarette in his hand, shook the ash with his index finger, and looked at the sea in the distance, with a flash of excitement in his eyes. Advertisement, Grand Line? I'm really looking forward to it. At this moment, at the gate of Rog Town, in the area shrouded in smoke, there was a sudden sound of steel breaking. Taking a closer look, it turned out that it was the 10 hands in Smoker's hand. After fighting for a long time, it finally lost to the famous sword in Kuina's hand, He Dao Yi Wen. So it broke directly from the middle. You lost. Smoker tilted his head to look at the gleaming sharp blade across his neck and exhaled lightly. Then he threw away half of the 10 hands on his right hand, and spit out the cigarette holder in his mouth. With trembling hands, he tore the cigar from his chest and lit it again. He raised his head, looked at Kuina through the smoke, and there was a trace of bewilderment in his eyes. Even though he knew that he would lose this battle, but when the defeat came, he was still a little bit unwilling. How? Do you still want to fight? Kuina watched Smoker remain silent for a long time and frowned. No, defeat is defeat, you guys go. Smoker took a deep breath, stared at Kuina, and collected the smoke around him. Then he asked, what is the purpose of you going to the Grand Line, and who taught you Marine 6 styles? Ding, Kuina sheathed her knife and walked slowly past Smoker. Going to the Grand Line is of course an adventure. As for what you said about Marine 6 styles, I don't even know what you're talking about. After she finished speaking, she ignored Smoker, passed by Tashigi who was rushing towards this side, and under the watchful eyes of a group of Marines, she calmly walked towards the Liberty from the passage they gave way to. Colonel Smoker, are you all right? Tashigi walked up to Smoker and looked at him with concern. Fine. Smoker glanced at Tashigi, then turned to look at Kuina's back, his eyes fixed. Adventure. He didn't know if what Kuina said was true, but he was sure that the other side was indeed different from ordinary pirates. He didn't know if the opponent had just gone to sea and hadn't gotten used to it yet, and he didn't know if the marine behind the opponent was guiding this group of people and making them so different. Without thinking about it, he took a puff of cigarette, exhaled a big smoke ring, turned his head to stare at a marine coming from behind, and said, No, Silverhair Sorata. Where is it now? He had just glanced at the other ship, but didn't see Sorata. Follow Yinfa's colleague and report that Yinfa should be on the execution platform in the central square now. The execution platform. Well, it's on the execution platform. The arraignment marine paused, and then said, Silver-haired went to the Goldie Roger tavern and bought a drink, then went directly to the central square, and then stayed on the execution platform until I heard the news. Smoker looked in the direction of the central square, slightly lost in thought. The execution platform, one piece, Roger. Silver-haired Sorata, what is your purpose? Okay. Advertisement. As soon as he thought about Sorata, Sorata appeared from his sight. At the end of the street, a handsome guy with silver hair and a big wine barrel on his back gradually came towards him. The big handsome guy, with a flushed face, staggered and looked very slow, but in fact he was very fast, like a flash, and appeared in front of Smoker in the blink of an eye. Until Sorata stood in front of him, the afterimage on the street behind him still hadn't dissipated. Belch. Sorata reached out and patted Smoker on the shoulder, laughing. Smoky man, you're done. I thought you were going to fight for a long time. He glanced at the 10 hands that had been broken in two on the ground, and a flash of clarity flashed in his eyes. Ha 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 ha, you guy, you're too useless. He kept patting Smoker on the shoulder, and then his tone became serious. You are like this, but you can't practice the belief in your heart. Wait another 2 years, when big events will follow one after another, you will be eliminated very quickly. Smoker smoked, standing in place with ease. He is in a very bad state now, blood beads are still dripping from his chest, and he can't resist Sorata at all. Since you can't resist, then bear it in silence, but when he heard the words 2 years later, he couldn't help it. 2 years? He looked at Sorata, his brow furrowed, and there was a gleam in his eyes. Be clear, 2 years later, what major event will happen? Also, why 2 years later? Did I say something? Sorata's eyes flashed awake for a moment, then dimmed again, and he shook his head, walking past Smoker. Glancing at Tashigi standing next to Smoker. And you, Ms. Tashigi, if you want to firmly practice your ideals, you have to work hard. Saying that he gave Tashigi a thumbs up. Otherwise, you'll spend your whole life in East Blue with the smoking man. Stick to your ridiculous dream. In the future world, it won't be possible to meet such a talkative person like us every time. He walked past them wagging his head to his companions who were already waiting for him at the bow. After walking a few steps, his figure disappeared and appeared in the bow of the ship in an instant. Then he put the big wine jar behind him on the deck. Jay seemed to be lying down and instantly slumped on the deck chair. Ha 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 ha, let's go, guys, let's go to the Grand Line. Oh, the three of Ahua cheered loudly and moved quickly. Then, under the gaze of countless Marines at the pier, the Liberty quickly sailed towards the distance of the sea. Chapter 65 Complete World Fame. Looking at the Liberty drifting away, all the Marines breathed a sigh of relief. Facing Sorata is too much pressure for them. Even if they all know that Sorata's group is completely different from the real pirates, they look like they are easy to talk, and they seem to be drunk again. But the invisible mental pressure emanating from the other party made them dare not go beyond the slightest in terms of psychology or action. Didn't you see that their boss, Colonel Smoker, didn't dare to knock off the hand on his shoulder when facing Sorata? Smoker sat on a piece of gravel, watching the Liberty from afar, lost in thought. And Tashigi was holding Xiao Yi Shi Yu, and stood quietly aside. She looked at the sea in the distance, with bewilderment, firmness, and hope in her eyes. She didn't expect that Kuina could really win against Colonel Smoker, who had always been invincible in her heart. This made her truly see how it is possible for women to surpass men. She tightened the knife in her hand, and the blankness in her eyes disappeared instantly. Kuina can do it, she believes she can do it too. At this moment, there was a sudden shout from the street in the distance. Smoker, Smoker, Colonel Smoker, Naval Headquarters, urgent, urgent fax. Along with the voice came a Marine, panting heavily and drenched in sweat. He ran to Smoker, gasped for breath, then handed the fax to Smoker with trembling hands. He just received this fax a few minutes ago. When he first saw it, he was frightened by the above content. Then thinking that Smoker was leading Marine to fight Sorata and his gang at the pier, he immediately took the fax and rushed towards the pier. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the Marines around him safe and sound. He was really afraid that if he missed it, he would see a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood on the pier. After all, he has never seen a pirate with a reward of 500 million in his life. Smoker took the fax, took a drag on his cigarette, and looked down. Looking at his hand shaking, he almost lost the fax in his hand. Colonel Smoker, what's the matter? Sensing Smoker's state, Tashigi asked hastily. See for yourself, Smoker said, handing the fax in his hand to Tashigi. His face was full of anger. The headquarters is really for nothing. Such important information is only sent now. He lowered his head and touched the knife wound on his chest. Although it was scarred, blood still seeped out from time to time. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. Boom, advertisement. He punched the ground in front of him hard. Are you kidding me? Open one eye, close one eye, etc. Is it still Marine's justice? Could it be that behind Sorata's group is not the defected Marine, but the real Marine? How else to explain? They will shave such advanced skills, and judging from their behavior style, they are not pirates no matter what. He stroked his chin and thought for a while, then his eyes lit up, and the anger on his face disappeared instantly. Could it be that Sorata and his gang are Marines undercover agents? He smoked a cigarette and kept nodding. Now I can figure out the weird behavior of their gang, and also figure out why Sorata and Kuina didn't hurt them. And judging from the fights and words, Kuina and Sorata seem to be encouraging him and Tashigi all the time. Judging from Sorata's last words, there is nothing wrong with it, this guy is encouraging them. Thinking of this, his mood suddenly became brighter. As long as it's not defeated by pirates, Marine is undercover, after all, it's still Marine. Fighting against one's own people, is that called fighting? At most it is a sparring. Isn't there a winner and a loser in sparring? Ha ha. Not long after Sorata and the others left the town of Rog. New World. That is, the sea area in the second half of the Grand Line. The Red Line divides the Grand Line into two sections, crossing the Red Line where the world government, Marijoy, or the Fishman Island, 10,000 meters under the sea is located, entering the second half of the Grand Line, which is New World, and New World's the overlord is the Four Emperors, and this is the most difficult and dangerous sea area. It is also the hiding place of the great secret treasure, One Piece, Raftel. Now the Four Emperors have all received the urgently delivered news today, as well as the reward order. In a section of sea not far from the entrance of New World. At this time, a huge three-masted giant sailing ship was sailing. The bow of the ship is round and painted silvery white. From a distance, it looks like a great white whale, which is extremely majestic and magnificent. Even if the ship is in a sea with big waves like New World, it is like being in a calm sea. With an extremely powerful momentum, it broke through the huge waves, as if it was overwhelming the sea, and quickly sailed towards the unknown sea in the distance. And on both sides of it, two ships followed each other, a total of 4 foreign ships. These 4 ships are replicas of the giant ships, but the colors are different. Looking at it from a distance, it seems that the giant whale is swimming in the sea with 4 small whales. This fleet is the main fleet of the Whitebeard Pirates, one of the 4 emperors. The biggest ship right in the middle is the exclusive sailing ship, Moby Dick, owned by Whitebeard Edward Newgate, recognized as the strongest man in the world at this time. On the Moby Dick, Whitebeard was sitting bare-chested on the deck at this time, leaning against the forward cabin of the bow. On both sides of him, several nurse girls in sexy pink nurse uniforms were busy changing the infusion bottle for him. Advertisement, and he himself looked at the golden punk head in front of him, the captain of the first team of the Whitebeard Pirates, and Marco with the nickname, Phoenix. Margot, what's the big deal that makes you so anxious? No, check it out, it's about your old friend, the Golden Lion. Oh, Golden Lion? Remember this guy seems to have disappeared for nearly 20 years? It won't be news that shocks the world as soon as it comes out. Gu la la la, smiling, he took the newspaper that Margot handed over and read it. Watching him stop laughing, he laughed out loud when he saw Sorata's reward in the newspaper. The old guy lost to the young man after all, gu la la la. Then he threw away the newspaper, took the wine jar beside him, raised his head and drank. He didn't care much about the sudden appearance of Sorata, he just sighed in his heart that another old guy fell into the hands of young people and became a stepping stone for others. Dad, stop drinking. Margaret looked at Whitebeard and exclaimed, still on the IV. Well, isn't the old golden lion gone? I have to practice it for him? Gu la la la. Apparently he was looking for a good excuse to drink. Margao looked at Sorata's reward order on the ground and was stunned for a while. You are so young. Wanokuni, Ghost Island, the base camp of the 4 Emperors Kaido. Toto Land, All Nations, Cake Island, 4 Emperors Charlotte Linlin base camp. 4 Emperors with red hair. Shichibukai. As long as you pay attention to the situation in the sea, pirates, marines, and personal forces who pay attention to the news have all received the news about the death of the Golden Lion and the unprecedented 500 million bounty of Sorata at the same time today. Their responses also varied. Shock, excitement, curiosity, indifference, killing intent, indifference. Regardless of their emotions, they remembered anyway, remembering a group of East Blue pirates who had just set out to sea. A man named Silverhair. A young man too young. A person who offered a bounty of 500 million Baileys for the second time at sea. A person who killed the old legend when he went to sea, and wanted to build his own legend. Chapter 66 Upside Down Mountain, End of East Blue, hey hey. Come on, I can't stand it at this level, how can I become a strong man in the sea? Zoro has adapted to this level of pressure since he first came to the dojo for a year. Liberty, on the middle deck. Sorata stood at the bow of the ship, the space field unfolded, and the pressure was on the 3 of Ahua, especially Ahua and Aluo. After these 2 guys ate devil fruit, they improved very quickly. And Adao also entered the field training with the blessing of the infinite stamina radish. Calical. Indigo leaned against the door of the cab, staring at the 3 of Ahua with interest. It's amazing, I can still control the pressure. Sorata, the newspaper delivery bird. Kuina was lying on the deck chair, drinking tea, watching the newspaper bird flying in the sky, and turned to Sorata and shouted. Oh! Sorata withdrew her gaze from the 3 of Ahua, looked at the newspaper bird standing on the railing at the bow, walked over and spoke. Get a copy of the latest newspaper. As he spoke, he handed over 100 berry. The paper delivery bird took the money in its beak and put it in the red leather bag hanging in front of it, then took out a newspaper from another bag hanging on its body, and handed it to Sorata. Watching Sorata take the newspaper, it saluted Sorata, spread its wings, and flew towards its next guest. Sorata turned around, leaned her back against the guardrail, unfolded the newspaper in her hand, and read it. About the Golden Lion. As soon as he saw the title, he knew that this news should be dedicated to him. Really, below the title are all his information, and Golden Lion's information. In the end, he was called a new legend. Sorata stroked her chin, looking down in thought. Is it a legend? Since you say so, then I will accept it. He originally went to sea to become the strongest, to become a legend. Although this is only a small reason for him to go to sea, it is also a reason, isn't it? Then when he turned to the next page, a reward order suddenly fell out from this page. He took it quickly with his eyes and hands, and took a closer look. It turned out to be his own. The reward order this time is much clearer. 500 million? It's not low, it seems that this time it's really famous. Sorata, show me. No, take it, it's all old things, and there's nothing to see. By the way, how long will it take for us to reach Upside Down Mountain? Kuina took the newspaper and casually said to Kaido, there are still about 2 days. Oh, regardless of the fact that the town of Rog is the closest to the Upside Down Mountain, in fact, this nearest island is just the nearest island. In fact, starting from the town of Rog, the fastest sailing will take a few days to reach the Upside Down Mountain. And the closer you are to the Upside Down Mountain, the greater the weather changes and the slower the sailing. Wow, 500 million. Advertisement. Kuina looked at Sorata's bounty and let out a big cry. What's all the fuss about? You beat Smoker in Rog and the bounty will go up. Yeah, that's right. Kuina put down the newspaper, stood up, walked to Sorata, stretched out her hand to hug Sorata's arm, rested her head on Sorata's shoulder, and accompanied him to look at the sea in the distance, with excitement in her eyes. Soon to the legendary Grand Line. On this ship, Indigo will not have too much excitement. After all, this guy is used to it. 2 days later. Upside Down Mountain. Due to its special geographical location, the nearby sea area has extremely extreme currents and climate. It makes it impossible for ordinary navigators to predict the wind direction, and the ocean currents near here, under the reefs and waves, will appear from time to time, Uzumaki-shaped ocean currents. As long as you don't pay attention, the ship will be destroyed and people will die. And there is one and only one seaway leading to the artificial canal of the inverted mountain. So the ships that can come here and want to go to the Grand Line are all sea warriors who are ready to die. With the approach of liberty, it can be seen from a distance, the black clouds connecting the sky and the earth. Because of the relationship between the inverted mountains, the clouds gather together, roll up and down, and from time to time there will be 1 or 2 white and red lightning bolts like giant dragons. Sorata stood at the bow of the ship, looking at the spectacular clouds in the distance, with a flash of excitement in his eyes. Then he turned his head and shouted to the back, Ahua, go help Adao steer the helm. Aluo pays attention to the ocean current. Let's rush through here in one breath and go directly to the artificial channel. To understanding. Oh, by the way, you can also help Indigo. The current here is too fast. I'm afraid the two of them won't be able to control the rudder. Understood, Captain. Indigo walked into the pilot room with a few puffs. As the distance narrowed, the speed of the ship became faster and a huge wave rushed towards it. The bow of the ship broke through the huge waves, like a sharp sword, inserted into the sea area. Watching the oncoming sea and rain, Sorata opened the field, enveloping him and Kuina within. The sea water rushed in and slid to both sides along a transparent space. Looking at it from a distance, it is like installing a transparent windshield on the bow of the Liberty. As the Liberty deepened, the surrounding ocean currents became more and more turbulent. If you didn't pay attention, you would be taken away by the ocean currents, deviate from the only route, and hit the red line directly. After rushing through a thick fog, the eyes suddenly opened up. In the distance between the sky and the earth, standing tall, this world is the tallest and largest continent. Red Line. The ring-shaped continent where the Red Line and the Grand Line intersect is named for its red soil cover. The Red Line and the Grand Line are two rings respectively, so there are two intersections, and the first intersection is the inverted mountain in front of you, and the second intersection is the Holy Land Marijoy, which is also a barrier that distinguishes New World from Paradise. Seeing the red line deep into the clouds in the distance, Sorata sighed. No wonder celestial dragons in the former kingdom of God want to live here. Living here is like looking down on the entire sea. The feeling of dominating the world must be enjoyed by these stupid pigs. As the distance got closer, a faint but bright light suddenly came from between the distant mountain walls. Sorata looked at the light, turned her head and shouted to the back. Adao, do you see the light in the distance? That's the entrance to the Grand Line. Try to keep the rudder steady, and we'll head straight for it. Then he looked up at Arlo and shouted, Allo, furl the sails, now it's fast enough, we'll ride the current. To understanding. Sorata and Kuina stood at the bow of the ship, watching the approaching lights, and finally saw the only channel in the blink of an eye. I saw a silver-white waterway on the mountain of the Red Line, like a ribbon, fluttering up and down with the current. Advertisement, I don't know who dug this amazing project. Kuina looked at the waterway excitedly, and exclaimed, it's really spectacular. It's really spectacular. Looking at the approaching waterway, Sorata's eyes were filled with excitement. The Liberty with its sails folded, under the control of the three of Adao, steadily rode the upwelling current leading to the artificial canal in the distance. As the Liberty gradually stabilized, the three of Adao rushed to the bow, while Indigo followed them leisurely. Lying on the guardrail of the bow, the three of Ahua were all excitedly staring at the red line in the distance. Wow! It's so spectacular. Yes, it is indeed the entrance of the Grand Line. The entrance is so exciting and spectacular, and I don't know how magnificent the real Grand Line is. Everyone had a look of anticipation on their faces. Kalikal, Captain, do you want to hold a ceremony? Ceremony? Sorata stroked her chin, thinking of Luffy. He pulled an empty wooden barrel from the side, put his right foot on it with a boom, and shouted loudly. I, Sorata, want to be the freest person on the sea, the strongest in the world, and go wherever I want. Boom. In order to become the strongest female swordsman in the world. Kuina grasped the words of Adao tightly, saw a trace of tenderness in Sorata's eyes, and said silently in her heart. It's also to keep up with Sorata's pace. In order to become strong. In order not to be bullied by others. In order to go on adventures in various places. Ahua, Aluo, and Atao spoke respectively, then all eyes turned to Indigo. Indigo looked at Sorata and the others with a flash of reminiscence in his eyes. I still remember that when he first went to sea, he was so full of vigor and hope. Thinking of this, he couldn't help showing a hint of ending. Indigo, it's your turn, we're partners, aren't we? Sorata knew that there must be a story in Indigo, but he didn't ask. Everyone has their own past, whether it is good or bad, that is everyone's own business. When the day he wants to tell, Sorata believes that Indigo definitely tell him. Partner? Indigo looked at Sorata and suddenly smiled. Yes, in this group of young pirates, he saw the appearance of real partners, not the superior subordinate relationship like Golden Lion. He feels equality and respect here. Kalikal, for the wishes of the captain and everyone, I will work hard to research various potions. During these few days together, he already knew why Sorata asked him to be the ship's doctor. One, of course, is his medical skills, and the second is the various viruses of the Grand Line. Due to the special geographical location of the Grand Line, each island is different, which has caused some islands to remain in ancient times or even prehistoric civilizations. All kinds of ferocious beasts live on these islands, including viruses and even plagues of course. And what he is best at is making various virus medicines and vaccines. Then they smiled at each other and kicked the bucket hard. At the same time, Liberty was like a sharp sword drawn out of its sheath, without any accidents, riding the rising current, easily inserted into the artificial canal, and sailed towards the top of the Red Line. Chapter 1. Following the ocean current, the Liberty quickly rushed up to the top of the mountain, and then soared into the air. Sorata was in the air, but her feet were firmly on the bow. Seeing the peaks of the mountains colliding with each other, and then merging and heading for one place, his eyes could not help looking behind the Red Line. That is the direction of New World. He has the ability to fly, why don't we go directly to New World to find the 4 emperors and challenge him one-on-one? While he shouldn't be able to beat any of them right now, fighting the 4 emperors will give his hockey a quick workout. He looked away and glanced at his companions who were shouting excitedly, and thought about it. Forget it, although this is the plot that the most handsome readers hope for most, but this is not his plot. Although he hopes to collide with the strong, but not now, the partners can't bear it. It doesn't make sense for him to go alone. The purpose of his going to sea is not only the strongest in the world, he should enjoy the scenery on the road leading to the strongest, right? Liberty rushed to the top, paused for a moment, then fell quickly down under a sense of weightlessness, and finally hit the only waterway formed by the fusion of 4 water currents. With a bang, it quickly slid down. Wow, this experience is much more exciting than riding a roller coaster. Sorata. What's wrong? Arlo, who was standing on the observation deck, put his hands on his forehead, stared hard ahead, and shouted to the bottom. There seems to be a black mountain blocking the way ahead. Mountain? Ah-wah raised the bar subconsciously. You guys are not awake, are you? There should be an endless sea below. Where's the mountain? Anyway, there is. At this moment, the Liberty rushed out of the clouds at high speed, and a vision suddenly opened up. Everyone saw ahead, the black mountain wall blocking the exit of the waterway. No way. Also, there is really a mountain. With a cigarette in his hand, Adao looked hard at the black mountain wall in the distance, and then, as if seeing something terrible, he stopped smoking and shouted loudly. It's not a mountain, it's a giant monster, whatever it is, go. Advertisement. Sorata looked at the giant beast that was blocking the exit and kept shouting, a smile flashed in his eyes. This giant beast can be said to be the most romantic animal in One Piece. Yes. Laboon, as if sensing Sorata's arrival, Laboon stopped screaming and froze in place. Liberty, like a moth to a flame, quickly rushed towards Laboon's belly. What, it's about to hit. Looking at the huge black wall that was getting closer, Ahua subconsciously took a few steps back, and shouted loudly. Sorata, I'll leave it to you. Seeing that the Liberty was about to collide, the Sorata space field spread out instantly, and then gave a loud roar. Hold on tight. Everyone grabbed the objects around them, except Adao. Then all I saw was that the Liberty, which was moving at high speed just now, including the seawater below, suddenly stopped in place. Due to the influence of inertia, the bodies of the people on the boat rushed forward involuntarily. Fortunately, they all held onto the things around them tightly, so they didn't make a fool of themselves. But Adao is different. This guy thought he was Sorata, standing at the bow, smoking a cigarette, motionless, posing pose. As a result, when the inertia came, it flew forward in an instant. With a bang, it hit a transparent wall at the bow, and its entire face was flattened. Ha 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 ha, you guys are too funny. Why don't you listen to people? When Sorata put away the Sorata field and the air and sea water circulated instantly, Awa covered his stomach and laughed at Adao. Is this the welcome gesture of the Grand Line? Arlo quickly climbed down the mast, ran to the bow of the ship, looked up at the huge head that was hundreds of meters high, and exclaimed loudly. It's really amazing. Well, it's really pitiful and sad. Sorata looked at Laboon, red eyes flashed, he could feel the sadness of the big guy in front of him. Sorata, why'd I feel like this guy is crying? Kuina took Sorata's hand and tightened it. Pitiful? Why can't I feel it? Adao stood up from the bow deck, patted the dust that didn't exist on her body, straightened her hair, and then took a puff of cigarette smartly. You stupid pig, of course you can't sense it. 2 tentacles protruded from Arlo's head and moved. There's a really sad feeling, like this guy has been waiting for someone and that person never shows up. Advertisement. As he spoke, he touched his heart with his hand, as if infected by Laboon's sadness. Sorata turned to look at the people on the bow and asked. Want to know why this guy is like this? Think. Everyone replied in unison. If we want to, why don't we just ask those who know? Ask who? You'll find out later, ha 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 ha. Sorata laughed loudly, and swept across the entire Gemini Gorge, but found no other aura. So it's inside Laboon. He looked at Laboon in front of him, his eyes fixed. The Conquerors exploded in an instant, trying to stun Laboon and make the old man come out. But when he exploded Conquerors, instead of fainting, Laboon went berserk. It seems that Laboon also has a heart that is not afraid of anything. Laboon took the breath from Sorata as a challenge to it. It roared, then quickly lowered its head and opened its mouth wide to inhale. Then, under the horrified eyes of everyone on board, the Liberty followed the current and disappeared in front of Laboon in the blink of an eye. Sorata, what are you doing? We are being eaten by this guy now. In the darkness, Awa shouted loudly. Well, just eat it, friends, the first adventure of the Grand Line has begun. Sorata's eyes flashed red, and he had already sensed the breath ahead. A risk? I just hope it doesn't get digested. Adao took a deep breath of the cigarette, and in the darkness, the only ray of light emerged. Ha 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 ha, how could it be possible? You'll know how romantic this guy is later. Sorata looked ahead, with anticipation and curiosity in her eyes. If it is said that waiting for someone for a full 50 years is not a romantic thing, then nothing could be called romantic. At this moment, a strong light suddenly came from ahead, and the Liberty passed through the strong light, and fell into a dark green lake with a bang. Everyone's eyes were blinded for a moment, and then they were clear for a moment. Everyone showed shocked expressions when they saw the surrounding environment. Chapter 2. Crocus. No way, aren't we swallowed by whales? How could there be blue sky and white clouds in this guy's belly? Could it be a dream? Aluo looked around in shock, and quietly pinched his thigh with his hand. Hiss, it hurts. It's not a dream, then what's going on with all this? He looked around puzzled, and then his eyes lit up. Look, is there a small island over there? Hey, there really is a small island. All eyes followed the direction of Arlo's finger. In the middle of the waves in the distance, a small island with only one tree and one house was rapidly heading towards them. When the island came close, they could see clearly what kind of island it was. It is clearly a boat with a small island style. Someone. I saw a burly black figure walking out of the house on the island. Looking again, it turned out to be an old man. The old man was wearing a flowered shirt, shorts, and slippers. It looked like he was in a dangerous place, but he was on vacation. He stared at Sorata and the others with widened eyes and frowned, without speaking, but walked slowly towards the only tree on the island. The guy's gaze made the three of Awa nervous for a while, thinking it was some kind of peerless powerhouse. That look is too oppressive. Unmoved, the old man stood under the coconut tree, sat down on the deck chair, opened the newspaper and read it, ignoring Sorata and the others. You guys have something to say? Okay. The old man stared at Adao with wide eyes. Adao was frightened by this guy's eyes, and shook her hand holding the cigarette. Then he was furious. You be **************, are you going to fight? Don't look down on me. Do you want to do it? It will kill you. Who do you think will die? So it's you. The old man squinted his eyes and said loudly. You guys broke into other people's homes for no reason without saying hello, and now you want to do something. Also, it's really deadly if you use your hands, so please don't use force here, and you can go out later. Advertisement. Oh, sorry. Everyone saluted the old man in unison. Awa pushed the mirror frame, took a step forward, and asked curiously. Grandpa, can you tell us where this place is? I remember that we seemed to be eaten by a giant whale. Why is it the same as outside now? Also, who are you? Is it here? The old man thought for a while, then stared at Awa and said, when asking someone's name, it is polite to state your own name first, isn't it? Oh, that's true, my name is. Before Awa could say anything, the old man spoke automatically. My name is Crocus, I'm the lighthouse keeper of Twin Gorges, age 69, Gemini, ***X. You guy can't wait for someone to finish talking, can you talk about it? Awa looked at the old man and became furious. Okay, calm down. Adao hurriedly pulled Awa back. The old man paused for a moment, and then said, if you want to ask where this is, you broke into my private resort center, and you still speak so arrogantly. Private holiday center? Arlo looked up at the sky, and looked left and right. This day seems to be fake. Well, this is what I drew. You don't think you are in the belly of a mouse, do you? So we're really in the belly of a giant whale. The old man nodded and said affirmatively, yes. Where we are now is in Laboon's stomach, Laboon. Laboon is the name of this whale. At this time, Kuina stepped forward, stared at Crocus and asked, Master, why are you in the belly of this whale? Me? Don't look at me like this, I'm a doctor, what? It turned out to be a doctor. We thought you were hiding in the whale's belly to hunt the whale. All three of Ahua breathed a sigh of relief. Kuina didn't have as many dramas as the three of Ahua. She looked at Crocus and asked calmly, so the uncle lived in this whale's body to heal his wounds? Yes. The old man turned his eyes to the distant sea and said loudly, it's coming. What's coming? Advertisement. Everyone's face was blank. At this moment, everyone only heard an ear-splitting scream, and then a bang. The entire lake suddenly turned upside down, with huge waves surging into the sky. What's the matter? What's the matter? The three of Ahua hurriedly pulled the objects on the boat to prevent them from being overturned by the huge waves. Listening to Laboon's continuous mourning, Sorata's eyes flashed a trace of sadness. It's painful. Then he teleported directly to Crocus, and the space field expanded, controlling the small island of Crocus towards a tall iron gate blocked by a painting in the distance. Old man, hurry up and give it a tranquilizer. This guy is really terribly persistent. You know Laboon? Well, you can say you know it, or you can say you don't know it. Don't tell me these tongue-twisting words, you little brat. Crocus yelled at Sorata. Then he looked at Sorata, especially his silver hair and blue pupils, his brows frowning slightly, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. Silver hair Sorata. Why, does the old man know me? Sorata turned to look at Crocus, a look of curiosity flashing across his face. Has his fame spread across the sea so quickly? What he didn't know was that his name was spread all over the Grand Line and even the world by the World Economic News Agency in less than a day. Crocus is stationed at the Twin Towers. When he has nothing to do, he just reads the newspaper. He basically knows everything reported, so of course he understands him. He was still lamenting 2 days ago that Golden Lion was actually defeated by a rookie who just went to sea, but he didn't expect to meet the rightful owner today. He didn't think much, looked at the door in front of him, and quickly climbed up the iron ladder. It's still important to tranquilize Laboon. Hold on, old man, I'll bring my partner over, let's go and have a look together. Okay, hurry up, Laboon can't wait too long, quickly. Saying that, Sorata instantly disappeared in place. Teleportation. Crocus stared at where Sorata had disappeared, his eyes fixed. When Sorata teleported to his side for the first time, he didn't see it clearly and thought it was speed, but now he knew it was teleportation. No wonder he couldn't sense it at all. What a monster. After a while, Sorata controlled the Liberty and rushed over. When they reached the Iron Gate, the three of Ahua were amazed, and then climbed up the iron ladder. Sorata and Kuina followed, while Indigo remained on board, having little interest in these. Not to mention the laboon of a few hundred meters, he has seen the giant sea kings of a few kilometers or tens of thousands of meters. So he is not interested in laboon at all. Chapter 3 Isn't 50 years of waiting romantic enough? The crowd followed Crocus into the small iron gate on the big iron gate. I saw a passage full of steel inside. Sorata looked at the passageway in amazement. Grandpa, did you build these all by yourself? Yes. Without turning his head, Crocus said as he walked, in order to effectively heal Laboon, we can only dig out these channels in his body to give him medicine. It would take a lot of time for one person, not long. Not long? It's only a few decades, isn't it a few decades? Ahua pushed his glasses and stared at Crocus in surprise. He was so dazed that he almost tripped over the swaying aisle. So, have you been here for decades? It's been about 50 years? Although I left for a while in the middle, I finally came back here. As he spoke, Crocus stopped in front of an iron gate. He stretched out his hands and twisted hard on the round switch on the iron door. I saw the iron door in front of me open towards the inside with a harsh, creaking sound. Crocus walked in first. After entering the iron gate, I saw a small space inside the gate. The space is full of wooden barrels, and from the pungent medicinal smell coming from the room, one can know that these wooden barrels should all be filled with medicine. Crocus went through the iron gate and walked straight to a large needle tube shaped like a cannon. He first turned the needle, and pierced it down towards a wooden barrel. Then I pulled the push handle of the needle tube upwards, and saw a stream of dark green medicinal liquid, which was quickly sucked into the needle tube along the needle. Everyone looked at the busy Crocus, but they didn't make a sound, but everyone's face was full of curiosity. After the needle was filled with sedative, Crocus turned the needle to point it at a wall outside. He stretched out his hand and pulled it, and a hole the size of a window suddenly appeared on the wall. Inside the cave was a blood-red flesh wall, which was wriggling along with Laboon's screams and impacts. Crocus, pushing the giant needle, plunged into the fleshy wall, shouting loudly at the fleshy wall. Stop it, Laboon, stop hurting yourself. That wall is the wall that divides the world's oceans. Even if you hit it to death, it will never be broken. Laboon. As the medicine in the needle tube gradually penetrated into the flesh wall in front of him gradually stopped wriggling, and the loud screams and impact sounds from outside also stopped. Huh, has it finally stopped? As Luo said, he wiped the sweat off his brow. Apparently, it's not fun being inside a gigantic, wobbling creature. Advertisement. By the way, when we came down from the red clay field Luchong, we saw that Laboon had wounds all over his head, coupled with his non-stop screaming and hitting. Kuina frowned, stared at Crocus and asked, Master, can you tell us the story of Laboon? Don't you guys know the story of Laboon? Crocus turned his head to look at Kuina. A trace of doubt flashed in his eyes, and then he turned his head to stare at Sorata. Look at this little brother, just help me get here quickly, and ask me to use the tranquilizer quickly. Obviously you or I know. By the way, the silver-haired guy, I don't know yet, why do you know that Laboon needs a tranquilizer? Also, look at me like you know me. Feeling the eyes of everyone looking at him, Sorata shrugged. I said I guessed. I don't know if you believe it or not. As for the look in your eyes, I seem to see everyone with this look. Saying so, Sorata stroked her chin and nodded. Yes, I see this look in everyone. Oh, I guessed it. Crocus looked suddenly enlightened. I thought you knew about Laboon from that old guy, so you knew me. Really believe it? Sorata's mouth twitched. Crocus closed the window, turned around and looked at the crowd and said, the wound on Laboon's head was caused by constantly hitting the red line. Hit the red line? Everyone was taken aback, but Sorata stood there calmly, raised her head, looked left and right, with curiosity in her eyes. It's amazing. Not only can it understand human nature, but it also allows humans to create such a miracle project in its body. Crocus, watching everyone's reaction, had a gleam in his eyes. The silver-haired kid must have known about him and Laboon, but he didn't expose it. Instead, he told Kuina and the others about Laboon's story with flashes of reminiscence. So that means the pirates abandoned Laboon? It's really disgusting. After listening to Crocus tell Laboon's story, Awa couldn't help but cursed. I don't know, maybe he was really buried in this devil-like sea. Crocus pushed the frame, and then said, Laboon's collision has lasted for decades. It misses his partners, but it can't help it. As its body grows tightly, it is impossible for it to return to West Blue Went. It can only be infinite. It keeps shouting and bumping here, hoping that one day, that group of pirates will really keep their promise and come back to see it. Since Laboon can understand human speech, didn't you explain the situation to it? Kuina glanced at the potion barrels in the room, frowned and said softly, it must be very painful. Why didn't you say that? I left here for a few years, just to find out whether the group of pirates escaped or died in the sea. Did you find it? No, I told Laboon when I got back, but he didn't listen, instead he hit the red line harder. In its world, never believe it, his partner will abandon it. Adao smoked a cigarette and sighed. It's almost 50 years, it's really long enough, and it's really romantic enough. Advertisement, Master, I do know where all of Laboon's former partners are. Just then Sorata spoke. What? You know where the Rumba pirates are? Crocus's old eyes suddenly lit up. He stared at Sorata closely, his body jumped upright, nervously. Having been together for nearly 50 years, Laboon can be said to be his only family member in this world. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stayed in Gemini Gorge for nearly 50 years. This guy can also be said to have done the ultimate romance for Laboon. Looking at Crocus, Sorata's eyes show admiration. Laboon is admirable, and this old man is even more admirable. Not everyone can wait 50 years, nor can everyone be with someone for 50 years. After the Rumba pirates set off here, they were all buried in the sea within 2 years. Are they all dead? Crocus, lightened all over, quickly lowered his head, and the light in his eyes quickly dimmed. He paused for a moment, looked up at Sorata and asked, "How do you know that?" "How did I know? Don't worry about it. I know that the Rumba pirates, there is another guy who has been trapped in a sea area and hasn't come out yet." "Who is it?" "An Afro musician." "That's right, they actually have an Afro musician on board called Brook." Crocus looked at Sorata, a twinkle of excitement in his eyes. "Now that I know where Brook is, could you please tell me which sea area it is in?" Sorata looked at Crocus helplessly. "Old man, even if I tell you, Laboon can't go there. I tell you this because I want you to think of a way to give Laboon hope. Maybe I will pass through that sea area to rescue the pirate named Brook, and tell him that Laboon has been waiting for him." "Oh, is that so?" As he spoke, Crocus smiled at Sorata, then bowed and saluted. "Then please, help Laboon and Brook complete their agreement." "Hey, old man, I didn't promise you." Sorata looked at Crocus, took a step back, and waved. Crocus straightened up, stared at Sorata seriously and said, "No, you will." Ha 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 ha, he laughed out loud. He is in a good mood now, and from Sorata's attitude, Sorata will definitely help Laboon, otherwise he doesn't need to say so much to him. Seeing Crocus laughing, Sorata stood in the distance with the same smile on his face. He's actually going to tell Brook Laboon. A nearly 50-year commitment and waiting are worth his special trip. As for whether Brook will come back after learning about Laboon, or after fulfilling his promise to circle the Grand Line, that is his business. In the matter of persuading Laboon not to hit the red line, he doesn't have the charm of Wong Luffy. Chapter 4. Will you be the ones Roger is waiting for? What, aren't you One Piece? Gold D. Roger, the ship's doctor. Twin Gorges, under the lighthouse on the open space outside the house where Crocus works and lives. Indigo walked up to Crocus, who was sitting on the stone stool, in a flurry of puffs, and looked at him in amazement. He didn't pay much attention when we first met, but now he's closer to look carefully. Nor did he expect to meet an acquaintance here. "Excuse me, are you?" Crocus looked at Indigo suspiciously. "Me?" Indigo made a circle in front of Crocus, then laughed. "Calical. Then dance and dance for a while." Seeing that Crocus still didn't understand, he was so anxious that he kept jumping on the spot, and finally had no choice but to speak. "Me, Golden Lion, the ship's doctor on board the Golden Lion. I saw you on Roger's ship 25 years ago at the Battle of Artwall." "Oh, you are on the Golden Lion ship." Crocus looked at Indigo and said in a daze, "Why haven't I seen you? You couldn't have been hiding in the back then." Crocus nodded as he spoke. "That's the only way to explain why I didn't see you at that time. Of course not for this reason. At that time, there were so many ships and so many people in the Golden Lion fleet. Why would a ghost pay attention to a doctor?" Is that so?" Indigo nodded, then looked at Crocus and asked, "After the Roger Pirates are disbanded, you won't be here forever?" "I've always lived here, followed the Roger Pirates, mainly to find the Rumba Pirates for Laboon." "Wow, it turns out that when the uncle was young, he was the ship's doctor on the One Piece ship." At this moment, Awa was wearing a chef's uniform, and Aluo and Adao were holding 2 large plates of fish in one hand. These fish were caught by Sorata when he had nothing to do when he just came out of Laboon's body. "Now that you have come to the Grand Line, how can you not enjoy the delicacy in this magical sea?" They planned to leave after lunch, so they invited Crocus to eat too. Wa put down the plate in his hand and stared at Crocus with curiosity on his face. "Can the old man tell us about Roger's adventures?" "Okay, don't ask. What's the use of knowing this from the old man? We have our own adventure." Sorata walked over with a few bottles of wine, gently slapped Awa on the back of the head. "Roger's adventures, we just go and see for ourselves, don't we?" Advertisement. As he spoke, he gently sat opposite Crocus, and with a bang, he put the wine bottle on the table. "Old man, for the sake of being so happy today, you have to drink with me." "Do not worry." Crocus glanced at Laboon floating on the shore and smiled. Out of Laboon, he immediately told Laboon that Brook was still alive, and told him that his companion had not abandoned him. This made Laboon very happy in the water for a while. Then they wanted to go to the Grand Line immediately, but they were persuaded by Sorata to wait for Brook to fulfill their agreement. "I think Laboon will never hit the red line again. After all, being abandoned and not being abandoned are 2 different situations. With hope in my heart, it won't be so painful." Crocus then looked at Sorata, grateful. "Even if I give up my old life today, I will have a good drink with you." "It's unlucky to say that old life. We are having a banquet at this time, so we are happy." "Exactly, ha 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 ha." After eating and drinking, Sorata leaned against the stone table, holding a toothpick in his hand, picking his teeth. Crocus, on the other hand, stared flushly at the busy figures on the Liberty, lost in thought. It's nice to be young. After he drank less than a bottle, he became a little groggy. And these guys are just like normal people, especially this guy, who drank strong alcohol. His gaze turned to Sorata, looking at the wine gourd hanging on Sorata's waist. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes. This guy drinks the strongest alcohol, he chokes to death on a sip, and Sorata is like a drink. It's really old, it's incomparable. Following Sorata's example, he leaned against the table and shook his head. At this moment, Arlo's exclamation suddenly came from the boat. Ah, why is this so? What's wrong? Uruo ignored Adao. He jumped off the boat quickly, walked to Sorata's side quickly, and asked loudly. Sorata, look what's going on. Why doesn't the compass work? Compass? Sorata stared at the compass that Arlo handed over for a moment. How could he forget about this thing? Ha 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 ha. You guys don't know anything, just come to the Grand Line? Sorata came back to her senses, saw Crocus speak, and he stopped talking. Advertisement, he really forgot about this thing, or he asked Smoker for it in Rog Town. How could he not know the Grand Line needs a special compass? It should be because I was too excited in Rog Town, and I drank a little too much that day, so I forgot in the end. Oh, old man, do you know what's going on? Arlo looked at Crocus and asked quickly. Due to its special geographical location, the Grand Line has a completely different magnetic force from other places. The general compass cannot be used when it arrives here. General compass. So there is a special compass? Okay. Crocus nodded, then took out a special compass-shaped needle covered with a transparent spherical glass cover from his pocket. No, this is the special record pointer, specially used by Grand Line to record magnetic information. As he spoke, he handed the record pointer in his hand to Arlo. The record pointer is to record the magnetic force of mutual attraction between islands and islands to guide the direction of the next island. Therefore, every time you arrive at an island, it will take a few hours to several months to make the record of the compass. Fill it up so you can move on to the next island. Oh, Arlo looked at the record pointer in his hand with a curious look on his face. Then I thought of something, raised my head and asked Crocus. A few months, if it takes a few months to record the island, so we have to stay on this island for a few months. In principle, that's right, but, what? But there is also a special record pointer that can directly point to a place, the permanent record pointer. Permanent. Well, it is permanent. The permanent record pointer can always point to a designated island. Marine uses this pointer to quickly reach any island in the Grand Line. Of course, such pointers are also very expensive. Generally, they can only be found on larger kingdom islands. Oh, okay, Arlo. Sorata stood up and patted Arlo on the shoulder. Let's go. Grand Line's adventurous journey has officially begun. He was actually a little embarrassed about forgetting to record something as important as a pointer. Let's go, old man, don't worry, I will definitely bring Brooke the thought of Laboon. Saying so, Sorata turned and headed straight for the Liberty. Twin Gorges, Lighthouse. Crocus stared at the distant sea for a long time. He saw a completely different look from Sorata from other pirates. Could this be the one Roger was waiting for? He shook his head. Probably not, because he didn't see Roger's shadow in Sorata. The person Roger wants to wait for must have Roger's shadow. Chapter 5, the starting island number 5. No Liberty. The entire hull was wet as if it had just been salvaged from the water. At the bow, the sheep's head is not yet dry, shining golden light in the setting sun, just like a real sheep. 2 streams of seawater flowed down the eye grooves of the sheep's head, as if the sheep's head was also scared to cry by this route. On the deck in the middle of the ship, the 3 of Ahua and Indigo were lying on the deck, too tired to move. During this half-day's time, they have experienced the 4 seasons of the year, spring, summer, autumn, and winter. One second it was sunny and sunny spring, the next second came the snowy winter, just after the sleet winter, the summer thunder and lightning followed. In other words, autumn is relatively relaxing. But the ghost knows that you can still encounter unimaginable weather such as sandstorms on the sea. What the hell? Have you ever seen human-headed, human-sized hailstones? Have you ever seen a sea current full of icebergs? Have you ever seen tens of meters of waves blown by a storm? They met all these things in this half-day. If it weren't for Sorata's ability, they should have been buried in the sea long ago with this small boat. Is this the welcome gift from the Grand Line? It's really special? Sorata stood at the bow of the boat, looking at the small black spots in the distance in the setting sun, and breathed a sigh of relief. He was also a little tired these days, not physically, but mentally. He didn't know what other people looked like when they first entered the Grand Line, but their journey was indeed quite exaggerated. It is the Grand Line old man like Indigo who has never encountered such a frequently changing weather. Compared with the 4 seas, the Grand Line is relatively narrow, like a ribbon around the planet. So in the Grand Line, the chances of encountering other ships are very high. Every encounter is basically a brutal battle. This is also the second scary thing about Grand Line. If you are not strong enough, you will be sunk by other ships at any time, which will become a courier package and make another ship stronger. Here, with money, you can buy everything, including but not limited to slaves, common commodities on the Grand Line. In the first half of the day, Sorata and the others encountered several pirate ships, but none of these pirate ships survived the start of the voyage, so they were completely buried in the depths of the sea without fighting against Sorata and the others. It's also possible that these guys were unlucky enough to meet Sorata. Maybe it was implicated by Sorata, because Sorata has a kind, Grand Line seems to be resisting his entry. Ha 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 ha, maybe he was thinking too much, They didn't choose any route this time. On Twin Islands, they rushed randomly. Finally, the number 5 route was selected, while Luffy's route was 4. So Sorata is completely unknown about the future. Advertisement: why not go to the Whiskey Peak, Island number 4, of course I want to meet other starting islands. Are you on the Grand Line, want to go to Alabasta, and Magnetic Drum Island, where Chopper is located, isn't it easy? Both of these are big islands with kingdoms on them, especially Alabasta is one of the 20 royal families in the world. Besides, Wei Wei is Alabasta's princess, Nafiru Talai Vivi, and she should have just joined Barlock Studio. It is impossible to be in Whiskey Peak now, and there is no point in going there. Then be willful, choose a route at random, and then find the permanent pointer to tinker with it, just with Alabasta. According to Crocus, the starting island of route number 5 should be an island with a kingdom called Kingdom of Bath. It is said that this kingdom is famous for its rich production of a kind of wine called Bath. Thinking of wine, Sorata couldn't help swallowing. Fortunately, he could choose his favorite island by random selection. Creak, creak. Kuina walked over, stepping on the wooden planks that had been corroded by seawater. Don't look at them going to sea for less than a month, but this journey is not easy. Especially Upside Down Mountain and the half-day voyage I just experienced. After all, the Liberty is just a small sailboat with millions of Baileys. It is Sorata's ability to take care of him to survive this journey. Otherwise it would have fallen apart. Sorata listened to the sound and didn't take it seriously. When it comes to the Grand Line, Liberty will be eliminated in a short time. The weather here and the currents do not permit such a crude vessel to sail. He didn't have any regrets either. They were not the protagonist group, and it was impossible for Liberty to give birth to a legendary ship spirit. Bass Island is Spring Island and Winter Island. Kuina quietly walked to Sorata's side, pulled Sorata's right hand, hugged her in her arms, looked at the island that was getting closer, and said, "It's amazing. There are 2 very different weathers on one island. And they are harmonious with each other." They can now see the general outline of the island ahead. Looking at Base Island from a distance, it looks like 2 big steamed buns, connected to each other, straddling the sea in the distance. The island on the left is lined with trees, but the one on the right is a touch of white, obviously covered by snow. Look at the sky again. Above Winter Island on the right, there is actually a thick layer of clouds. And the cloud layer seems to be completely isolated by something. The meridian is clearly in a straight line, and it is blocked between the 2 islands. Looking at it from a distance is indescribably magnificent. For this phenomenon, Sorata can't explain it clearly, and I believe no one can explain it. It can only be attributed to the special magnetic field of the Grand Line to create such a marvelous spectacle, which can also be called a miracle. Advertisement: puff puff puff. Indigo took the lead, followed by the 3 of Ahua, and everyone stood at the bow. I seem to have been to this island before. Indigo looked ahead, dazed for a moment, then his eyes lit up. Indeed, I went to buy wine with Golden Lion. Tell me, how is the wine here? How to say? Indigo thought for a while, then looked up at Sorata and said with a smile, "It was all 7 or 8 years ago. I still remember that Golden Lion still prefers the wine here. It's just that I haven't been here since then, and I forgot what the wine here tastes like." He paused for a moment, his eyes flashed with reminiscence, and then said, "However, what impresses me the most when I come here is not the wine here." Not wine? Doubt flashed in Sorata's eyes. According to Crocus, Bass Island is best known for its wine, and if it's not wine, it's what it is. Seeing Sorata's doubts, Indigo quickly explained, "Anyway, for me, it's definitely not the wine that left the deepest impression." "What is that? Where is the king?" "King, okay." Indigo nodded and continued, that king of Bath. While talking, Indigo suddenly stopped talking. He remembered that when the Golden Lion came here, it was to invite the king here to board the ship, so he would be impressed. How could it be impossible to think of the king's name and what he looked like? If he hadn't seen Bass Island, he might not even know he had been here. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Indigo shook his head, looked at Sorata and said, "It's really strange, I don't have any impression of the king of the Kingdom of Bath now. It must have been too long." He couldn't help shaking his head while speaking. "When I get older, I always forget some things that are not so important." "Strange?" Sorata looked at the 2 islands in the distance that glowed golden in the setting sun. "A strong curiosity flashed in my heart. To be invited by the Golden Lion, although he was rejected in the end, he should not be an ordinary person." Chapter 6. This welcome is quite special. Base Island. Spring Island, Central Palace. The present place has long since lost the appearance that a royal palace should have. I saw that the palace was full of pirates. These pirates lie down, sit, or yell. Anyway, it's just a group of demons dancing wildly. But in the other palace, it was a different scene. The people here all had cold faces, drinking wine without saying a word. Eyes vigilantly watching all the people and things around. Judging from the aura emanating from these guys, they shouldn't be pirates. This is the Kingdom of Bath today. Looking outside, there are only 2 remaining complete palaces in the central palace. The entire kingdom is in ruins. The village around the palace is full of ruins, and in some of the ruins, one can still see numb and desperate faces. There are not many people, and they are not strong enough. They are basically old people and children, and there are few women. These people hid carefully, rummaging for something, as if they were afraid of being discovered. All of these remind the people who arrive here that this place is no longer the bustling, joyful, and happy kingdom of Bath. The island is still the same, but the base Wongwo above has disappeared. Now there are only some old, weak, sick and disabled left. And the former kingdom and dock have been completely reduced to a paradise for pirates and bounty hunters. Why can pirates and bounty hunters coexist peacefully on this small island? Think of it like Whiskey Peak, some incompetent people who are waiting to hunt and just entered the Grand Line. Pirates here can turn into bounty hunters at any time, and bounty hunters can turn into pirates at any time. They not only rob pirates, they even rob passing merchant ships. And some of them can even instantly transform into human traffickers. Because Grand Line, the best-selling item, is all kinds of slaves. Base Island. In the giant harbor between the two islands. The harbor, in the shape of a river, is deep but not wide. At first glance, it is artificially built. The left bank is covered with green trees, while the right is snow-covered and white. At this moment, the Liberty sailed in slowly in the afterglow of the setting sun. It was as quiet as night on both sides of the strait, without a single light. On the left, the river in Chundao Harbor is full of people. Look at the banner, it's a newcomer again, ha ha ha. The heads of this group of pirates, our Bada Bounty Group has accepted. Advertisement. Although Sorata is very famous, their flag is not so famous. After all, he had only offered a reward for a few days. On the left side of the river, one of Bada's subordinates lying on his stomach around Bada heard the boss's voice and quickly fired at Liberty. Snapped, this gunshot sounded like a fuse, then there were countless gunshots all around. These bullets were not aimed at the people on board, but at the ship. They want to smash the ship first, and then concoct the pirates who fell into the sea. They all fell into the sea, so for them, don't they do whatever they want? B***********D. I've said it all, this group of pirates belongs to our team. As countless gunshots rang out, Bada took the first step and rushed out. He wants to occupy a favorable terrain and wait for these pirates to fall into the water. It's time to catch one. Okay, at this moment, Bada, who had just jumped off the river and was rushing forward, suddenly stopped and froze in place. What's wrong? Boss. One of the dozens of subordinates rushing out after him asked quickly. Seeing that the boss didn't reply, he didn't dare to ask more questions, but just followed Bada's gaze to look at Liberty. After just one glance, he froze in place, and then his pupils dilated rapidly, as if he had seen the most terrifying thing in the world. At this time, everyone in the harbor, no matter whether they were headed or not, all stopped in place. They looked at the bow of the Liberty and their hearts twitched. How did this guy come to the Grand Line so quickly? Although they knew that with the reward offered by the other party, they would definitely come to the Grand Line. But this is too fast. They only saw each other's reward order 2 days ago. Come as you say, it happened to be met by them. The most important thing is that they are still on such a small boat. At first glance, this boat does not fit the identity of the other party's new generation of legendary big pirates. If Liberty wasn't too inconspicuous, they wouldn't have fired so hastily and wouldn't be as scared as they are now. Some newly emerged pirates quickly lay down on the ground, wanting to dig a hole to bury themselves. They dare not even breathe for fear of being discovered by Sorata. He stared at the Bada group who were frozen in place from a distance. They couldn't help feeling rejoicing. Fortunately, they were not the first to rush out. Well, this is not a special welcome ceremony held on Base Island. Sorata expanded the space field to block the bullets coming from all directions. Didn't the old man say that this place is very prosperous? It's very prosperous. Advertisement Indigo let out a pop and took a step forward, looking at the pier without a trace of light around him. He was stunned for a moment at the two palaces that were still intact on the hillside in the distance. Impossible. Judging by the degree of desertion, it must have been here for at least 2 or 3 years. The Kingdom of Bath is a member country of the world government, and it cannot be destroyed so easily. And there is still no news. As he spoke, he shook his head, then seemed to think of something. If you want to destroy the country, there is only one possibility. What's possible? Sorata looked at Indigo puzzled. That's the country that couldn't pay the heavenly money, so it was removed from the membership by the world government. Then this country will soon be wiped out by endless war. That would also explain why not much news is coming out. Because of the world government, it is simply not allowed to report the news here. As he spoke, Indigo's face gradually darkened, as if thinking of the past. A flash of memory flashed in his eyes. There are a lot of these countries in the New World. These countries are full of wars all year round, and the royal families of the countries are constantly searching for all the money and fighting with foreign countries, just for the slightest chance to join the world government. Oh, Sorata turned her head, looked at the palace halfway up the mountain, and said doubtfully, even if you are expelled, you won't be exterminated so quickly. As he said that, he put away the space domain. The bullets outside fell on the water like rain, splashing waves of ripples. These ripples seemed to be the same as Sorata's mood at this time. I was just looking forward to bringing him good wine here. Unexpectedly, the pier was full of pirates and bounty hunters waiting for them. He looked at the dilapidated palace in the distance, a red light flashed in his eyes, and his sense of knowledge swept across the entire pier in an instant. Not a single civilian was found. Even if the country is destroyed, there should be no one left, and it is impossible for everyone to become pirates and bounty hunters. His hockey then expanded, gradually enveloping the entire Spring Island outward. With his exaggeratedly powerful spirit, his current knowledge can easily cover a small island. Of course, not at the level of Enel. The guy's fruit plus knowledge color, thus forming his own heart network, should be the most extensive observation hockey in the whole One Piece. Okay. Sorata was taken aback suddenly. In his perception, apart from these pirates and bounty hunters, there were only old, weak, sick and disabled left on this island. Young adults don't get any. Even children are like mice hiding around. Breath frightened, weak. Chronic starvation. He then swept across Winter Island, but found no breath, it was dead silent. Chapter 7 Survival Base Island. On the beach under the embankment on the left side of the strip port. If you want to ask how Bada is feeling now, that must be the desire to die. In front of him, he followed the big team to pick up some soup and water. No, he worked hard a few days ago and recruited some brothers, so he grabbed the top spot today. Who knew that the first time he took the lead, he met Sorata's group casually. He even wondered if he stepped on dog shit when he went out in the morning, or he met a crow. Just then, he heard the voice he least wanted to hear, and then his shoulders sank. Well, your welcome ceremony is quite special. Sorata appeared next to Bada without a sound, stretched out his hand to wrap Bada's shoulder, like a good buddy. Let's talk for a while, both of us. Bada trembled all over. Plop, plop, plop. The moment Sorata appeared, his surroundings were suddenly very quiet, even the wind stopped, and now he felt as if he was in an abyss where his hands could not be reached, and only the sound of his heartbeat that kept accelerating was left in the world. And Shinigami's scythe rests on his neck. He felt right now that a chill was coming from the soles of his feet to the heavenly spirit, as if his soul had been frozen. His face was pale, his pupils dilated rapidly, his whole body was stiff, and he didn't dare to turn his head to look at Sorata who was holding his neck. If it wasn't for his stiff body supporting him with fear, he would definitely be so soft at this moment. He quickly lowered his head, letting the sweat permeating from his forehead at the speed of light, tick, tick, gather on the ground. Is this the strength of offering a reward of 500 million pirates? What an exaggeration, he had never felt this unparalleled sense of oppression in his life. And the speed is too exaggerated, like a ghost, it appeared beside him silently. Between life and death, Bada misses the days when he followed the big group to pick up leftovers. He swore that if he escaped this time, he would definitely not be the first bird. Behind Bada, followed his brother, watching his eldest brother being held by the neck. They drew knives and guns one after another, aiming at Sorata in unison. Even if the opposite side is a big pirate offering a reward of 500 million, they are not afraid at this moment. The boss is the boss for life. At this moment, the aura emanating from these guys really has a kind of loyalty that is rare in the world of One Piece. Advertisement, oh, interesting. Sorata looked at the minion behind Bada, a trace of curiosity flashed across his face. Although these guys watched Sorata's calves tremble, but they never took half a step back, which is a bit interesting. It stands to reason that these are basically temporary teams, and it is impossible to have any loyalty. At this moment Bada suddenly spoke. The guy didn't dare to look directly at Sorata, but turned around and yelled at his boys, "What are you doing with your guns up? Put away your weapons quickly. Boss." The younger brothers looked at the boss, puzzled flashed in their eyes. Boss what boss? I'm not the boss in front of the silver-haired brother. I can see clearly that the one standing in front of you now has killed the East Blue Overlord, the Creek Pirates, and the Dragon Pirates who are strong even in the Grand Line within a few days of going to sea, group. Later, the legendary pirate Golden Lion, Shiki, was killed, creating a new generation of legendary silver-haired pirates. Captain, silver-haired Sorata, ah. We know. The little brothers looked puzzled, but they put down their weapons obediently. Bada didn't dare to wipe his sweat, turned around, bent over, and stared flatteringly at Sorata. Brother silver-haired, damn the little brother, you just fired when you lost your head. You are my idol. Ever since I knew you were coming to the Grand Line, I've been waiting on the pier every day. This finally brought you here. I just followed others to shoot. No, as soon as I saw it was you, big brother, I couldn't wait to rush out. As he said this, the guy slapped him a few big mouths. After the beating, he raised his head and stared at Sorata flatteringly. I'm so happy to meet my idol today. Brother Silverhair, I promise, I'm definitely your fan. As he said this, the guy looked at Sorata expectantly, with fear in his eyes. It was as if he was really afraid of shooting his idol. Then there is excitement. I don't know if this guy has learned how to change faces, but the performance is pretty good. Oh, Sorata looked at Bada with a smile in his eyes. Advertisement, honestly, you're kind of funny. At this time, Liberty stopped behind Sorata, Kuina jumped on the guardrail, and landed beside Sorata lightly with a bang, followed by the three of Ahua and the tall Indigo. They all heard Bada's cry just now, fan, idol? They didn't expect that they had fans on the Grand Line not long after they went to sea, but they didn't know if this guy was telling the truth. Everyone stared at Bada curiously, wanted to see what else this guy had to say. Oh, this big sister must be beautiful, youthful and beautiful, comparable to 7 warlords of the sea. Boa Hancock, who is known as the most beautiful woman in the world, blue hair Kuina, big sister heads. Looking at Kuina beside Sorata, Bada hurriedly flattered me. Your beautiful face almost blinded my dog's eyes, and the infinite radiance that emanates is like the lights in the dark night and the sun in the morning, making people feel ashamed I dare not look directly. The younger brother behind Bada and other teams not far from here twitched the corners of their mouths when they heard this extremely shameless praise. Hey, 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 Naval Headquarters? There is an ultimate licking dog here, come and catch it. Kuina looked at Bada. The corners of her mouth curled up, and her eyes were full of smiles. Although licking a dog is a bit disgusting to others, it is another state for the person being licked. At least this guy's compliments aren't so annoying. It's no wonder that nobles like to bring a bunch of dog legs with them when they go out. The praise in words and the flattery in actions can really make people feel a false mentality that I am so great. Some people sink, some people get lost, some people enjoy, and some people get worse. Bada sensed Kuina's smile, and felt a little relaxed inexplicably. Then the spirit shook. It's not over yet. In order to survive, he has completely let go of face. He turned his head to look at the three of Ahua, but when he saw Indigo, he was stunned for a moment. But this guy concealed it very well, his expression didn't change at all, but he praised them fiercely. It was as if he wanted to use all the praises he had learned and read all his life on the silver-haired group. That's funny. And not funny. Sorata looked at Bada, and Bada's younger brother behind Bada, and gradually put away the smile on his face. This guy is not for himself, but for these little brothers. People who are trying to survive should not be ridiculed. Even if it is not clear whether the other party is a bad person or not, it should not be laughed at. Chapter 8 Bad. Tell me, what's going on here? Sorata looked at Bada, with a flash of killing intent in his eyes. I remember this is where the Kingdom of Bath is located. The Kingdom of Bath was very prosperous in the past, why has it become like this now? He doesn't care if the other person is licking the dog or not, or if they are really his fans. Judging from the breath he felt, there were basically no people left on the island. If it wasn't these remaining pirates who did it with the bounty hunters, he wouldn't believe it 100%. And there are only a small number of pirates on the pier, most of them are in the palace. Bada was startled by Sorata's eyes. He turned around quickly, bent over, stared at Sorata's shoes, not daring to raise his head. Carefully replied, the Kingdom of Bath was destroyed 3 years ago. 3 years ago? Okay, then how did you get here? On this island, most of the pirates and bounty hunters came from other places in the past 2 years. Oh, Sorata then asked the question he was most concerned about. Then can I trouble you, take me to meet the remaining ordinary people of the original Bath Kingdom here. Brother, there is no one left in Bath, why don't we go to the palace? Hearing that Sorata wanted to meet ordinary people, Bada's heart twitched, and then he said quickly, after all, ordinary people don't have much to look at, do they? I'm going to meet ordinary people. Sorata looked at Bada, her momentum surged. Hey, don't think that you are a big pirate, we are afraid of you. We Bath. To shut up, Buzz suddenly yelled, interrupting the younger brother who was about to speak just now. Then he raised his head and looked at Sorata, his eyes full of pleading. Brother, can we not go to ordinary people? There is really nothing to find. Obviously, Bada and his gang seem to be protecting something. Sorata looked at Bada and remained silent for a long time, then a domineering aura rose up, avoiding Bada and his gang, and swept across the entire pier in an instant. Everything was silent, and even the chirping of insects at dusk disappeared in an instant. When Bada's gang broke out in Sorata's momentum, they thought that Sorata was angry and they were going to start a massacre. All raised their weapons one after another, staring at Sorata solemnly with bloodshot eyes. Conqueror's Hockey. Bada stared at Sorata, his pupils constricted, and surprise flashed across his face for a moment. This can take us to meet the rest of the people in Bath. Who are you guys? Bada looked at Sorata, straightened up his hunched body, put away the frightened expression on his face, and turned into a completely different person, exuding an aura that was completely different from his current image. Momentum. This is the aura that can only be obtained after being in a high position for a long time. It is not strong, but firm. Advertisement, brother. The younger brothers looked at Bada as if they were meeting each other for the first time. Is this their obscene big brother who does everything for food? Impossible, impossible, it must be an illusion. Big brother, why does he exude such a noble aura? They only felt this kind of breath in the nobles and ministers of the palace before Bath was destroyed. Us? Sorata looked at Bada with a smile in his eyes. You could call us partners in justice. This guy finally stopped pretending. He was here for his little brother. He humbled himself to survive, and his little brother dared to look directly at him, a big pirate, for his big brother. I knew that this group of people was definitely not a bounty hunter in the usual sense. You must know that he was offered a reward of 500 million by the world government, and he can be said to be the only big pirate in the first half of the Grand Line. After knowing his identity, only this group of people is the most special in the whole pier. It's hard not to notice. In the world of One Piece, it doesn't matter if you are a pirate, a bounty hunter, or a marine who is really willing to go hand in hand with your companions. Actually not much. Coexisting with peers is actually a very rare quality. And this kind of people often have their own goals that they must stick to. Partners of justice. Hey, stop joking. Is there such a thing as Grand Line? When the younger brothers heard Sorata's words, they yelled directly at Sorata. How can people who only know how to live in peace feel the sorrow of being in a troubled world? Isn't justice such a trick of the world government? Little devil, don't show off your sense of justice here, it's not worth showing off. Obviously, these little brothers should all be persecuted by justice, which makes them no longer believe in justice. Just like East Blue's mad cow pirates, they just don't know whether they were persecuted by the nobles, or pirates, or marine, or simply world government. Sorata doesn't know. Since he didn't know, he asked directly. Seeing how excited you are not the rest of the Kingdom of Bath. The little brothers have a meal together. This is their identity on this island, which they cannot say anyway. Okay, stop talking, I can answer you whatever you want to know. Bada looked at Sorata and spoke seriously, but you have to tell me why you must meet the rest of the Bath Kingdom. If I say that I want to drink the famous Bath wine of the Kingdom of Bath, would you believe me? Advertisement. Sorata looked at Bada closely, her tone was serious, without any frivolity or mockery. Bada stared at Sorata, an inexplicable gleam flashed in his eyes. Everyone around is staring at Bada, maybe for a moment, maybe for a century. He spoke. Okay, I believe you. As he spoke, he smiled for the first time since meeting Sorata in a real sense. They are indeed what is left of the Kingdom of Bath. And his identity, cannot say now, although he found no malice in Sorata's attitude. But the opponent is a pirate after all. In Grand Line, it is a ridiculous idea to talk about benevolence, justice and trust to pirates. Then his face returned to his usual wretchedness. It was as if the person exuding a noble aura just now was not him. Huh, boss, you are finally back, we thought you were possessed by someone. Yeah, the way you looked just now, although noble, is also very scary. What are you talking about, you brats? Bada turned his head and yelled at his younger brothers. In fact, these younger brothers are not very big, they are only about 15 or 16 years old, they are indeed little ghosts. Then Bada turned his head and looked at Sorata, his face changed, matching this guy's fiery red hair, he was indescribably wretched. Boss, you can just call me Zauba from now on, and I'll take you to meet the rest of base. Are you really going to take them? They're all pirates? When the little brothers saw their boss, it was as if they really recognized Sorata as the boss. All right. For this one, I know what I'm doing. Bada said that he took the first step and walked towards the shore, motioning for Sorata and the others to follow. When walking on the dam, look at the people lying on the dam. Bada asked a question. Boss, how to deal with these guys? How do you want to deal with it? Sorata looked at Bada, the corners of her mouth curled up, and she let out a big laugh. Ha 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 ha. Since you are willing to be my little brother, then let these guys be handled by you. After hearing this, Bada stopped in his footsteps, a trace of surprise flashed across his face, and his eyes were cold as he looked at the countless figures lying on the ground. He does want to keep these guys here forever, because these guys on the pier are not the main reason for the current state of the Bath Kingdom, but these guys are the chief culprits for the remaining people of the Bath Kingdom to hide in Tibet. Chapter 9 The Kingdom of Wine, Once Glorious. Boss, this is the winery where the original Bath Kingdom made wine. Bada stood on one of the bridges on the big river between Spring Island and Winter Island, looking at the ruins of buildings on the bridge, memories flashed in his eyes. Because Base Island is a rare island with two climates, the products here are very rich. Spring Island, which is good at growing food, and Winter Island, which has unique hot spring water. So the combination of the two gave birth to the unique Bass wine of the Grand Line. As a result, the Kingdom of Bath has been prosperous in the past, making it a famous Kingdom of Wine throughout the Grand Line. He looked behind the river, his eyes fixed, and then he said, the ruins in front of us are the former wineries, and there were as many as 13 wineries like this when the Bath Kingdom was in its heyday. 13 seats? Sorata looked at the ruins on the bridge with Bada's gaze, and then looked behind the river along the river. I saw more than a dozen bridges, large and small, scattered on the river behind. And on each bridge, there are buildings of the same style as the ruins in front of them. These dilapidated buildings look even more desolate and lonely in the afterglow of the setting sun. From these bridges and buildings, he can feel the bustling scenes of the past. It must be a sea of people, with surging bows. Countless ships come here to fill up with Bath wine here, head to the Grand Line, and even the seas. Let's go. Sorata didn't say much and didn't ask much. Okay, boss. Bada took the lead and stepped onto the bridge. And behind him, dozens of younger brothers carrying extra-large packages. Although Bada didn't kill the pirates and bounty hunters who fainted on the pier. But they took away their food and money. Don't look at this guy as a bounty hunter. In fact, he didn't kill many people. If they were to kill so many people at once, they wouldn't be able to do it. Although they knew that these guys were people who should be killed, no one knew if there would be some really good people in them. The moment they walked across the bridge, Sorata and the others shuddered. Only the Grand Line can have such a magical place. It was warm spring one second, and cold winter the next. This is such a big span that people can't help but sigh that this is definitely not a natural formation, but God has created such a strange and balanced scene. In stark contrast to Sorata and the others are Bada and his gang. They entered Winter Island without their previous cautiousness. Advertisement instead, he became energetic and excited. They give people the feeling that instead of entering the dead winter, they have entered the spring of hope. The light in the eyes is different. Sensing the changes in Bada's group, Sorata and the others didn't ask anything, but tightened their clothes, followed Bada, stepping on the thick snow, and quickly headed towards the depths of Winter Island. On this quiet Winter Island, everything is silent, only the footsteps of their group at this moment, which makes them all feel adventurous. As the crowd gradually deepened and turned over a small slope, the eyes suddenly opened up. Looking at the empty plane in front of them, all eyes turned to Bada. Sorata's eyes flashed red, but she didn't find any breath. He turned his head to stare at Bada, and said with a smile, Bada, you brought us here to have a banquet and eat Snow Mountain hot pot, right? Hey, is there such a thing as Shuishan hot pot? After hearing this, Ahua was taken aback, then pushed the mirror frame, and said excitedly, why didn't I think of that? Endless snow is the best refrigerator and water. It must be great to eat hot pot in the snow, oh. Arlo put his left hand in his trouser pocket, and his right hand brushed his hair. The wind was a bit strong, which messed up his Shaw Mat hairstyle. No wonder you guys are looking for so much food. So I'm here to hold a Snow Mountain banquet, ha 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 ha. What a great idea. Adao took out the cigarette from his trouser pocket and put it on, took a deep breath, and looked at the excited two people. It's really retarded. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that Sorata was joking, only these two guys took it seriously. He then turned his head to one side, looking at the plane in front of him with doubts. No matter how you look at this place, it doesn't look like a place where people can hide. But he remembered that Sorata asked Bada to bring them to meet the rest of the Bath Kingdom. Brother, just follow along. Bada didn't pay attention to the two Awa who were so excited that they wanted to eat Snow Mountain hot pot, but walked to a protruding stone and stopped. Is the boss really going to take them in? A younger brother looked at Bada, couldn't help but stepped forward and said loudly. Advertisement. Although Sorata and his gang didn't show any malice, they let them take so much food and money. But they are pirates, and it's a big pirate with a reward of more than 500 million. When the time comes to the destination, if they really show malice, it will be too late. Not only will they suffer, but those who hide will also be discovered by other pirates on this island, caught and sold into slavery. This is the last thing they want to see. It is also the reason why they have been hiding their identities. Because of the destruction of the Kingdom of Bath, all the villagers here became the targets of traffickers. So far, more than 90% of the villagers have been captured and taken as slaves. It's okay, I trust them. Boss. Looking at the younger brother and wanting to say something, Bada hastily stretched out his hand to interrupt him. Well, if you don't trust them, don't you trust me? He didn't believe in Sorata's group for no reason, but from the news and the performance during the meeting, it can be inferred that Sorata should be really different from ordinary pirates. And he has an ability that no one knows about. That is the observation haki that he awakened when he was very young. His knowledge can see clearly the true thoughts in a person's heart. So when Sorata said that they were partners of justice, he believed it. Since Bath was delisted by the world government, which led to the destruction of the country. He has seen countless guys who speak justice but are extremely evil in their hearts. These guys have captured countless people from the Bath Kingdom, causing countless families to be ruined and their wives to be separated. This also made Bada and his gang no longer believe in justice. That's why they were so angry when they heard Sorata's words. Because they used to be such people who believed in justice. When the real righteous people came, they didn't believe it, but questioned it loudly. It's just that I was hurt too deeply, so I no longer believe it easily. They are not slaves like mad cows, so they are not pirates, just bounty hunters. This also shows that they still have a bright heart. Hearing what his boss said, the younger brother didn't ask much. He slowly backed away from the crowd, watching Sorata's group warily. Although he believes in his boss, he still needs to be vigilant. Chapter 10. Reporter Sorata ignored the little brother, but turned to look behind. What's wrong? Kuina's eyes were on Sorata all the time, and when she noticed Sorata's strangeness, she hurriedly asked. It's all right, some little flies and a reporter. Reporter. The little fly Kuina knows what it is, it must be some pirates. But the reporter, she didn't know. Okay. Sorata turned her head and looked at Kuina with a smile on her face, not paying much attention to the people behind her. He felt this reporter at the pier, after all, he was the only one who was not stunned by his conqueror's haki. Supernova pirates appear on the Grand Line every year, and there are reporters behind these pirates. Only these reporters can spread the news of these supernovae across the sea at the fastest speed. It can be said that every year's supernova is a war among journalists. Which of them follows the supernova that has the most topics, then of course the reporter who follows will also receive the most attention and expectations. Is that so? Kuina nodded her head, then her eyes lit up, she looked at Sorata and asked, so, are we also supernovas? Us? If it's a newcomer, of course it is, but if it's compared to popularity, it shouldn't be counted. Sorata stroked her chin and thought for a while, we should be, I don't know how to describe it, if you want to know, just ask that reporter later. Oh, let's go and see how the people in the Kingdom of Bath are hiding. I can't even feel the slightest bit of knowledge. As they spoke, their eyes looked at Bada in unison. Sorata behind them, behind a snow mountain. Wearing a fiery red coat and pink coxcomb hair, a reporter from the World Economic News Agency, Firebird Vance, was leaning against the snowdrift with an excited expression on his face. He found Sorata when they entered the port of Sorata. When he saw Sorata himself, he almost jumped up with excitement. It's good that supernovas appear every year, but not every reporter is lucky enough to meet them on the first island. Especially the silver-haired Sorata, who is now being called a new generation of legend by their president. Their president has issued an order that whoever can discover the news about Sorata first will be promoted and raised. No wonder he was so excited. Advertisement. After seeing Sorata use Conqueror's haki to stun the people on the pier, he felt like being caught by the goddess of luck. As expected, he was the man designated by the president to focus on, and he sent such big news as soon as he came. And judging from Sorata's movements, it's obviously not over yet. He is a reporter from the World Economic News Agency, so of course he knows about the Kingdom of Bath. Although the world government doesn't allow it to be widely reported, he can report on Sorata and thus the Kingdom of Bath. This is another big news. Thinking of this, he couldn't help laughing out loud. Hey. Thinking that Sorata was still ahead, he quickly covered his mouth and secretly smiled. Thinking of Sorata, he hastily raised his binoculars and camera, lay down on the snow slope, and shot at Sorata and his group. At this moment, he froze, because in his camera, Sorata was looking directly at him. A gleam of cold light flashed in the blue pupils, making him unable to stop breathing. If he hadn't known about Sorata's group and the pirates who killed indiscriminately, he couldn't help turning around and running away. This is the second reason for his excitement. Although there are supernovae every year, there are not many reporters who dare to photograph supernovae. If the sneak shot is discovered and happens to be in the middle of a supernova, it's okay to be a little more talkative. If you encounter a vicious supernova, you can only consider yourself unlucky. Whether you can live or not depends on the mood of the other party. Every year, a few unlucky reporters, directly or indirectly, die at the hands of supernovas. Reporter, but a high-risk occupation, but he was lucky enough to meet a pirate who is rare among pirates and who aims at adventure. Such a pirate, his life is basically not in danger. Of course, you can't provoke them either. After all, a pirate is a pirate, he has seen a lot, and the pirate who had dreams before suddenly became an extremely vicious pirate. In grand line, the best way to save your life is to hide away, don't touch, don't ask, don't tell, and keep quiet. At this time, he was in the press, and the technology of secretly filming for many years came to an end. Until Sorata turned around, the gaze disappeared. He stroked his beating heart and breathed a sigh of relief. Is this the 500 million man? The sense of mental oppression is too strong? It's not that he hasn't seen the big pirate. After all, he is a reporter. Supernova has seen it and secretly photographed a few of them. Advertisement, and among these supernovas, none of them have the strong sense of oppression that Sorata gave him. After his heartbeat returned to calm, he excitedly lifted up the small phone bug on his right wrist and dialed it. News of the world, headquarters. Bang, the president's office was suddenly pushed away from the outside in a hurry. The sudden sound made the president, Morgans, tremble in his right hand holding the black tea, almost falling to the ground. He must have it in his hand, raised it and took a sip, then looked at the subordinate holding the phone bug in front of him and said, "Why are you so anxious?" He didn't blame his subordinates, because if it wasn't for the big news, these subordinates would not have come to him in such a hurry. "President, Firebird's call. He said he has news about silver-haired Sorata." Oh, Morgans quickly put down the teacup, reached out to take the phone bug from his hand, put it on the table, picked up the microphone and spoke. Mossy, this is Morgans, hear the answer." When Morgans picked up the phone bug suddenly turned into Firebird Vance and spoke. "President, I'm on Base Island now." Bass Island? Morgans was taken aback when he heard the Firebird's voice, and then a gleam flashed in his eyes. "The former Kingdom of Bath, where is the island of Bath?" It's the Kingdom of Bath, that's interesting." Morgan's eyes lit up, and then he spoke. "Since we are in Bath, Sorata and his gang will definitely cause big news. You must take a picture of it as soon as possible and pass it on to understanding. Don't worry, when this news is over, I will definitely give you a promotion and a salary increase." Morgans gave an encouraging word and hung up the phone. The Kingdom of Bath. His idea is the same as that of Firebird. The world government does not allow it to be widely reported, so it will be fine for him to report on Sorata. And judging from the actions of Sorata and his group, they seem to have a sense of justice, and they will definitely not give up on the remaining people in the Bath Kingdom. At that time, there will definitely be conflicts with the world government. Thinking of this, he stood up excitedly and kept walking back and forth behind the desk. Big news again. Quack quack. Quack quack quack.